My private dungeon trapped monsters and turned them into my own army. Every creature behind me had attacked someone first. I had locked everyone inside a dungeon only I could open. During a werewolf outbreak on Blackwater Island, I opened that dungeon and sent my monsters toward 4 civilian shelters. One black hornet hit the werewolf attacking our healer. Its jaws closed around the beast and ripped it away before the fangs reached his throat. 3 more swarms split across the island when I gave the order. I was Nolan Reed, officially a D-rank rescue searcher. I found exits and missing people. Basically, I was the map guy behind the heroes. That night, the map guy had an army. The rule was simple. Every monster I released drained my mana and left my private dungeon with 1 fewer defender. If the swarms failed, 4 shelters full of civilians were overrun, so I sent every swarm I had. A radio operator shouted that monsters had reached Shelter 2. Another hunter raised his weapon at my hornets, then lowered it when one landed between a child and a werewolf. "Are those things with us?" he asked. "They are now," I told him. How did a disposable rescue worker become the owner of the monsters every hunter feared? I built that army because I knew what it felt like when stronger people decided your life cost too much. To answer that, go back to the first temple gate where I was supposed to die. Marcus Dale led my rescue division team to the entrance that morning. He was my manager, field commander, and the man usually assigned to stop my worst ideas. Pinnacle Guild had entered under pressure from Dominion Guild. Pinnacle's emergency signal followed soon after. When our rescue truck arrived, Dominion executive Victor Sloan was already beside the gate in an expensive coat. Victor watched our stretchers unload. "Dominion can take over. Your people can assist." The charity vulture wanted credit for fixing the emergency his guild helped create. I walked toward the barrier. Victor looked at my badge. "You're the D-rank searcher?" I stepped closer to the barrier. "I'm the rescuer going inside." Victor held his ground. "You should learn when stronger people are offering protection." "Send it to Pinnacle," I told him. "Dominion pushed them into this gate." The technician stopped looking at Victor. His smile tightened. "Tiny victory, very healthy for the soul." Marcus caught my shoulder. "Nolan, we go together." "Then keep up." He threatened to write my incident report himself. We both understood the violence in that sentence. Inside the temple gate, we found the trapped guild through a weak distress pulse. A healer knelt beside a dying teammate while clawed creatures rushed her. I planted my foot and drove my spear through the attackers in one sweep. The last body hit beside her hand. She stared at my D-rank badge and grabbed my sleeve. "You came. That was the whole job." Marcus lifted the injured hunter onto a stretcher. His receiver crackled before we could move. "Ghouls," Marcus warned. "Rear hall, a lot." My useful skills were Silent Voice and Sixth Sense. One mapped echoes. The other warned me before danger moved. I tapped my spear against the floor. The returns drew pillars, stairs, doors, and an eastern route inside my head. "East corridor," I told Marcus. "Move the wounded first." The group followed, but Sixth Sense tightened across my neck. The ghouls slowed when we slowed. They surged at every turn. Someone was hurting us. I stopped at the next chamber. This route was left open. The floor lit. A black magic circle spread under the group as dark chains rose around their legs. One clean edge remained outside it, so I kicked Marcus through. He rolled beyond the light. I shoved the nearest stretcher after him, then the circle locked around my boots. Marcus reached for me. "Nolan, take them out. I'll meet you outside." He wanted to argue. The ghouls entering the chamber made the choice for him. Marcus pulled the healer upright and led the survivors toward the exit. The circle sealed behind them. A voice rolled through the room. "A searcher who noticed the herd path. How irritating!" The temple boss stepped from the darkness. Dead faces shifted beneath his robes as he raised one hand. "Your eyes will serve me better after death." Dark energy struck my chest. The Hunter Awakening system marked the curse immediately. Ghoul conversion in progress. My health dropped so fast the numbers blurred. Gray veins crawled over my hands. The ghouls around the boss leaned closer, waiting for their newest coworker. I remembered Victor outside and hated that a small part of me regretted refusing his offer. Then I remembered the bureau hunter who had rescued me years earlier. He had carried me out while apologizing to every person he could not reach. He never treated the abandoned like a bad investment. That was why I wore the rescue badge now. I refused to make his choice look foolish. Silent Voice mapped the chamber again. Sixth Sense caught a pulse behind the wall. The curse mark on my chest burned when both skills touched the same hidden point. Stone lines appeared under the dust, leading toward a monument sealed inside the wall. The boss noticed where I was looking and sent the ghouls forward. I struck the wall with my spear. The stone split. A black monument stood behind it, covered in moving paths like a maze. The system responded before the boss reached me. Search type awakening confirmed. Curse mark confirmed. Hidden monument condition met. Class change available, Labyrinth Architect. My old class, Anonymous Observer, had spent years helping other people find the fight. Labyrinth Architect offered control over the battlefield itself. The prompt locked onto the curse and pinned it to its owner. Through the monument's light, the temple boss stepped closer with the ghouls closing behind him and finally named himself. "Mordrin," he hissed. "Remember it while you kneel." The ghouls were almost on me. I accepted. The monument opened beneath me. Empty air closed around Mordrin's hand as the chamber vanished. A heartbeat later, the class pulled me into a sealed maze before the ghouls reached me. A living map appeared across my vision. 20 red dots entered from different corridors. The tutorial gave me 1 day to kill every invading ghoul. Failure meant the curse finished its work. The first pack came fast. I watched their dots turn a corner and stepped into the lane they had chosen. My spear drove through the lead ghoul. The others crashed into it. I used the jam to finish them before they could spread. The system tagged Mordrin as the curse's owner and the temple's controller. Excellent. My murderer came with management potential. The class paused the conversion, yet my missing health stayed missing. Every hard swing made my vision pulse. The tutorial wanted an architect. It had received a tired rescue worker with 1 spear and a personal grudge. The living map kept feeding me routes. Red dots moved before the monsters reached my sight, so I stopped meeting them head on. I opened one door, let a pair chase me, then shut the lane after the first ghoul crossed. The separated monster died before its partner found another path. A second group tried to surround me. I struck the wall with my spear and read the returning echo through silent voice. Their feet scraped in the next corridor. I turned early, caught the leader at the corner, and made the rest climb over him. Each kill made the map clearer, but the maze kept changing. Corridors rotated after I passed. Doors moved to new walls. I had to read space faster than the invaders could fill it. Near the end, I lured another group into a narrow staircase and attacked from above. The last ghoul grabbed my ankle. I smashed its hand against the step, finished it, and limped toward the center. 16 red dots had disappeared. Then the map showed 30 minutes remaining. 4 ghouls stayed together near the center. I moved to cut them off and discovered my mistake. A 5th dot entered the corridor. It was twice the size of the others. The giant ghoul stepped into view and filled the passage from wall to wall. The 4 smaller ones spread behind it, covering every retreat. Beautiful. A wall with teeth had learned teamwork at the worst possible time. I tested the left corridor. The giant blocked it. I shifted right. 2 smaller ghouls closed the gap. One threw itself at my spear just to hold the weapon while the giant advanced. I tore the blade free and retreated. The giant's fist hit the wall where my head had been. Stone chips cut my cheek. The living map showed the checkmate clearly. Every normal route put me inside their claws. I had less than 30 minutes, an injured leg, and a body shaking from Mordrin's curse. Look, my D-rank body had no business surviving that corridor. The system had given me a map instead of muscles. Then the giant struck again. I rolled under the arm, stabbed its side, and watched the wound close around my spearhead. Raw damage would run out before that timer did. The 4 smaller ghouls spread wider. They were using the giant as a moving wall. That formation gave me the answer. I stopped moving through the maze like an intruder. The maze belonged to me. I pressed Sixth Sense into the living map. The skill warned me where the giant would strike. The map showed a square beneath my feet that could rotate with another block. A new command appeared. Spin block available. I activated it. The floor turned beneath the giant's charge. My position snapped from the dead-end corridor to the pack's unprotected rear. 1 smaller ghoul looked over its shoulder. Too late. My spear took the first through the neck. I kicked the second into the rotating wall. The third lunged, and Sixth Sense showed the claw before it moved. I ducked, cut its legs, and turned the same thrust into the 4th ghoul's chest. The giant spun too late and hit its own pack. 1 body flew across the square. Another vanished under its heel. That ended the teamwork meeting. 19 minutes remained. The giant charged again. I rotated away, but the creature learned from the first trick and swung toward my arrival square. Its fist clipped my shoulder and threw me across the floor. My spear landed out of reach. The giant planted 1 foot between us. Sixth Sense showed the next strike. The living map showed the block beneath the spear. I rotated that block instead of mine. The weapon snapped into my hand as the fist came down. I stepped inside both arms and drove the point under the giant's ribs. The curse core pulsed once against the steel. I twisted, activated spin block, and dragged the spear through the core as the floor rotated us in opposite directions. The giant fell across the square. Its red dot vanished last. White light swept across the living map, and the curse stopped spreading. Tutorial complete. Class confirmed. Labyrinth Architect. The maze absorbed the collapsing temple gate. The 20 tutorial kills rose again as my first bound ghoul defenders. Their red markers changed to blue and spread through the corridors. A second figure appeared in the central chamber. Mordrin hit an invisible boundary and glared at me from behind it. The class had bound the temple boss as the labyrinth's first guardian. Yes, the creature that tried to turn me into a corpse became my first employee. His attitude remained terrible. His resignation request was denied. The victory came with a warning. My new dungeon had walls, defenders, a boss, and durability. Every fight inside could damage all 4. Ownership felt amazing until the warning finished. Then, one final reward floated above my palm. King of the Labyrinth Sphere acquired. The sphere was invisible, cold, and connected to the dungeon I now owned. When I moved it, the living map answered from somewhere beyond the sealed maze. The little object felt like a handle attached to a very dangerous door. I had survived by using the support skills that kept me in the back line. The system had turned those skills into a prison door. Mordrin watched from behind the boundary while the bound ghouls took positions around him. The boss who had hunted my rescue team now guarded my property. Beautiful, also deeply concerning. Now I needed to learn what happened when I opened that door beneath a monster from the real world. Minutes after the temple gate vanished, the class dropped me at the nearest safe street. The rescue team was still gathered outside the empty lot. Marcus stood in the middle with my broken radio. He looked like a man planning a funeral. I had used the brief walk back to buy ice cream. Timing has never been my strongest stat. Marcus saw me first. His mouth opened. The healer I had rescued covered hers. 2 bureau hunters ran over, stopped, and checked behind me as if death had misplaced its paperwork. I raised the cone. Why does everyone look upset? Marcus crossed the distance and grabbed both my shoulders. The gate collapsed. You vanished! I noticed. He squeezed harder. Nolan! Careful! This is melting! The anger left his face for half a second. Relief replaced it. Then the anger returned with backup. One rescued hunter sat down on the pavement and laughed until he started crying. The healer punched my arm, called me an idiot, and refused to let go of my sleeve. Marcus watched all of it before lowering his voice. Give me one reason I shouldn't lock you inside the rescue truck. I glanced at the truck. The door opens from the inside. His grip tightened. That wasn't the question. I gave him the smallest truth that would keep him breathing. The temple had hidden a class change trial. I cleared it. The collapse pushed me outside. Everything involving my private labyrinth stayed mine. That night, I entered the dungeon alone and finally inspected what I had won. The class takeover had preserved the maze. Bound ghouls patrolled the corridors. Mordrin occupied the boss chamber and glared at me like an employee who had discovered unpaid overtime. The king of the labyrinth sphere floated above my palm. Nobody else could see it. Its rule came in one ugly sentence. I could use the sphere to pull a living target into my private labyrinth. If that target defeated Mordrin, it could escape with greater strength. So my new power was a prison with a promotion clause. Amazing, very normal, no possible way that could ruin my week. The dungeon also had damage, construction costs, and empty defender slots. A section of wall still carried the giant ghoul's fist mark. Several corridors needed reinforcement, and the starting gold would cover only a few repairs. I needed traps strong enough to kill intruders before they reached the boss. Most importantly, I needed a test target that could not flatten the whole place. Mordrin watched me inspect the damage. Release me, architect. I just met you, I told him. This is moving too fast. He threw a curse against the boundary. The wall absorbed it. Good. Employee access remained limited. 2 days later, Maya Ellis met me outside my building with enough apples to start a small business. Maya was my school-aged neighbor. Her family had fed me through several bad months, and she had decided my survival required aggressive fruit management. She pushed the bag into my arms. My mom said you look tired. I weighed the bag. Your mom packed a whole orchard. Maya shrugged. She thinks vitamins stack. I'm pretty sure this bag has its own gravity. Maya smiled and took a couple back. Huge help, life-changing. She studied the bandage under my collar. Did you get hurt again? Tugged the collar down. Occupational disagreement. Maya pointed at the bandage. With a monster? With management, I told her. Maya rolled her eyes and handed an apple back. Apparently sarcasm cost fruit. We had barely reached the corner when a woman screamed beside a police barrier. My daughter is still inside! The hotel gate had broken open above the building. Goblins moved behind shattered windows, and smoke rolled from the lobby doors. The woman grabbed an officer's sleeve and begged him to find Sophie on the 7th floor. Skyreach Guild still had not sent the district team responsible for the gate. I returned the apples to Maya. Hold these, I owe you the rest of the walk. Maya took the bag and looked at the hotel. Bring her out. That was the entire conversation. A police officer blocked my path. The district guild has a team coming. You can't enter alone. I showed him my Federal Hunter Bureau rescue card. What floor is the child on? Her mother said 7. Skyreach already left this gate long enough to break. The girl can't wait through their second mistake. His eyes dropped to the D-rank mark on my card. Where's your team? I closed my hand around the invisible sphere. I have backup waiting somewhere the goblins can't see. Inside the hotel, the quiet ended on the 2nd floor. Hotel staff lay near the service hall. The goblins had killed them before the evacuation finished. That was what neglected low-profit gates bought civilians. Someone saved money. Someone else paid in blood. Sixth sense caught movement above the ceiling panels. I stopped beneath the center tile and lowered my spear. You've been following me since the lobby. Come collect. The ceiling burst. Red goblins dropped behind me while another pack rushed from the stairwell. They had waited until both exits were covered. Good ambush. Wrong building. I opened my hand. The sphere activated beneath their feet. Space bent inward. The hallway stretched, and every goblin vanished before the first blade reached me. The last attacker had time to squeak. Then the hotel went silent. Inside my private labyrinth, red dots spread across the living map. The goblins landed in separate corridors and immediately panicked. One stabbed a wall, another tried to climb it. A third ran straight into a bound ghoul and discovered that my dungeon already had staff. I projected my voice through the map. "Welcome to my property." Several red dots changed direction at once. "My name is Nolan Reed. I control the routes, the doors, and every ugly thing coming toward you." A pack found one another and formed a defensive line. Smarter than expected, the bound ghouls attacked automatically. Red dots and blue dots collided across the maze while I stayed in the hotel and kept searching. One goblin pretended to fall, waited for a ghoul to bend over it, then buried a knife under the defender's ribs. Two more goblins dragged the wounded ghoul into a side passage and finished it together. My first captured monsters had spent less than a minute inside and were already unionizing against me. Wonderful. I used the living map to close the side passage behind them. The detour bought my defenders time, but the goblins started testing every door for a pattern. I had just stolen an entire outside pack without swinging my spear. The bill started immediately. One blue defender vanished from the map, then another. The red goblins had adapted. They baited the ghouls around corners, attacked from doorways, and used the maze against defenders that moved on simple orders. I wanted to watch. The crying above me mattered more. On the 7th floor, Sixth Sense led me to a locked housekeeping room. A little girl was crouched behind a laundry cart with both hands over her mouth. "I'm Nolan," I told her through the door. "Your mother sent me." The crying stopped. I broke the lock and kept my spear behind my back. "What's your name?" "Sophie." Sophie Lane was small enough that my rescue jacket reached her ankles. She stared past me at the ruined hall. "Are the monsters gone?" she asked. "They picked a fight somewhere else." That answer was true enough for a child, and weird enough for me. I walked Sophie to the elevator and pressed the lobby button. The police had already cleared the shaft and were waiting below. "Stay inside until the doors open," I told her. "Your mom is downstairs." Sophie grabbed my sleeve before the doors closed. "You're coming too?" "Right after I clean up." The elevator descended. The living map flashed red across my vision. Defender loss exceeds 50%. More than half my bound ghouls were gone. The surviving red goblins had gathered around one marker twice their size. The Red Goblin King had entered with the pack. Of course it had. I kidnapped one group of goblins and accidentally grabbed management. The king carried a hooked sword and moved straight toward Mordrin's chamber. If it killed my boss, the sphere's escape rule would hand it a power increase and send it back into the hotel. Sophie had reached the lobby. My choice became simple. I entered the labyrinth. Mordrin stood behind the final gate, ready to attack when the king arrived. I ordered him to stay inside. He hated that order. I enjoyed giving it. The Goblin King stepped into the central corridor and kicked one of my damaged ghouls aside. It roared at me and raised the hooked sword. The creature moved faster than its size suggested. Its first swing cut through a stone rail. I ducked the second and felt the blade pull air across my scalp. Mordrin struck the boundary behind me. He wanted the intruder close enough to fight. Too bad. If the king reached him and won, my brand new prison would hand the goblin a promotion. I had spent starter gold rebuilding that corridor and installing one repulsion trap, a launch tile aimed at the reinforced ceiling. The king was currently destroying property I already could not afford. That made the fight personal. I backed toward the marked tile. "Come on, you've beaten half my defenders. Surely one D-rank human isn't scary," the king charged. I stepped onto the marked tile, then slipped aside at the last instant. The king saw the open path to Mordrin and leaned harder into the rush. "Arrogance is free fuel when the trap belongs to you." Both feet crossed the trigger line. Then, I activated it. The floor exploded upward with concentrated force. The Goblin King shot into the reinforced ceiling and hit hard enough to crack the stone. Its sword fell first. The king landed beside it and stayed down. Across the maze, the remaining goblins froze. A system notice confirmed the kill, raised my level, and opened a new command. A monster defeated inside the labyrinth could be deliberately incorporated after battle. If an incorporated defender later died, respawning it cost gold. I accepted the Red Goblin pack. Their markers changed from red to blue. The survivors lowered their weapons and moved into the routes I assigned. A hostile pack had entered my dungeon. The ones left standing now belonged to my army. Mordrin stared from behind his gate. "Try looking supportive," I told him. He did not. When I returned to the hotel lobby, Sophie was already in her mother's arms. Police and cameras filled the street. Marcus arrived soon after, saw the dead goblins were missing, and cornered me beside an ambulance. "You cleared 7 floors alone," he said. "Where are the bodies?" I touched the side of my head. "I may have hit this pretty hard." Marcus folded his arms. I kept one hand against my temple. Memory loss is serious. Beef can help. Marcus repeated the word slowly. Beef. Medical beef, I said. Marcus pointed toward the rescue truck. Get in before I provide a second head injury. The next problem wore a suit. Calvin Rusk, the Skyreach guild manager responsible for that district, arrived before we left. His guild had ignored the hotel gate because the expected profit was low. Now, he wanted the Federal Hunter Bureau to keep the interviews quiet. Calvin gave me a practiced smile. Skyreach appreciates your service. We're prepared to offer appropriate compensation for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? I looked at the covered bodies near the lobby. His smile weakened. Calvin lowered his voice. Public panic helps nobody. Your neglect already put hotel staff into body bags. Marcus stayed beside me and let Calvin hear the silence. The manager tried again. Name a reasonable figure. $10,000, I said. Donation to the Bureau Rescue Fund. Today. Calvin's eyes widened. For silence? For the children your team left in that building. Silence is the part you're buying for yourself. He looked at the cameras, the grieving families, and Marcus's expression. Calvin stopped bargaining and pulled out his phone. My phone buzzed before he reached his car. The donation had cleared. Part of that money would repair the labyrinth. Part would replace the defenders his neglected gate had killed. The first monsters I stole were mine now. So were their repair bills. Then the system finished calculating the damage. The number waiting inside made $10,000 feel temporary. My reward for clearing the hotel was 2 vacation days. At headquarters, the paperwork clerk stamped the leave form while coworkers pretended to sort equipment behind me. Every one of them kept glancing at the D-rank badge on my chest. A man who cleared a broken hotel alone should have looked exhausted. I looked better than I had before the gate. The badge was becoming harder to explain. Marcus leaned across the counter. Whatever happened in that temple, keep your story straight. My story is that beef improves memory. That story is going to get you hit. I took the leave form and kept the reawakening secret. A public second awakening meant tests, interviews, guild attention, and Victor finding a new reason to stand too close to my life. On the first morning, I opened the labyrinth damage report. Broken walls, missing defenders, one ceiling crater shaped like a goblin king. Total repair cost, 53 Hunter gold. 1 gold traded for roughly $100 through the Federal Hunter Bureau market. The bill came to about $5,300, nearly twice my monthly take-home pay. I had 80 gold from the class rewards. Paying the repair left 27. That was the whole calculation. Pain arrived efficiently. I authorized the repair. The gold vanished. Stone pulled itself back into damaged walls. The ceiling crater closed from the edges. Bound ghouls respawned in blue light while the red goblins claimed fresh corridors and immediately started stealing equipment from each other. A goblin grabbed a ghoul's rusted helmet. The ghoul grabbed the goblin. I closed the living map before management became physical. Mordrin watched from his boss chamber. Your army lacks discipline. You tried to murder me this week. I had standards then. Look, workplace culture needed time. My phone rang while the last wall finished rebuilding. Tessa Wynn worked in the monitoring division and was one of my closest bureau friends. She knew every missing hunter before the rest of us knew they were missing. She also knew exactly how to bribe me. Beef dinner, Tessa announced. Find one person for me. I leaned against the rebuilt wall. That sounds suspiciously like a date. Tessa clicked her tongue. It sounds like payment. Try earning it before you flirt with the invoice. Who disappeared? I asked. Her voice flattened. Arthur Kane, the S-rank weapon master. That name killed the joke. Arthur was one of the country's 5 S-rank hunters. Half the combat world wanted his training. The other half wanted him to stop judging theirs. The monitoring division had lost track of him that morning. An S-rank disappearing without notice could shut down half the bureau's schedule. I closed the labyrinth and grabbed my spear. Send me his last confirmed location. Tessa paused. You're agreeing that quickly? You said beef. Bureau currency remained undefeated. An hour later, Silent Voice picked up an argument in a city park. 2 older men sat over a strategy board beneath a pavilion. One complained that the other had cheated. The second man had the calm posture of someone who could punch a building and charge the building for damages. A ring of broken game pieces sat beside his hand. The missing S-rank had apparently spent his morning terrorizing retirement hobbies. I checked the board from behind him. Move the left piece, I offered. You win from there. The calm old man flicked a wooden game piece at my forehead. Sixth Sense screamed before his finger moved. I tilted my head and the piece cut past my ear. It buried itself halfway into the pavilion post. The other players stood up and left without asking questions. Smartest person in the park. The old man turned. You dodged. You threw furniture at me, I said. Arthur tapped the post. That was a game piece. It has entered the construction industry. Tessa reached the pavilion seconds later. Nolan, I asked you to locate Arthur. I didn't ask you to annoy him. The old man's eyes sharpened. Tessa stopped beside me and gave a shallow bow. Master Kane, headquarters has been looking for you. Arthur Kane glanced from her to my spear. This arrogant brat gives advice before introductions. In my defense, the move was good. Arthur checked the board. It was. The correct move made him angrier. Arthur moved the piece anyway. The abandoned opponent had left his coat on the bench, so Arthur declared checkmate to an empty chair. The old man returned, saw the finished board, and pointed at me. You gave him that move? I offered public service. Arthur flicked a second piece. I caught it this time. Tessa looked from the buried piece in the post to the one in my hand. I found the missing S rank. I may lose the rescue worker. Beef claws, I reminded her. Survive first. He stood, took one look at the way I had shifted away from the projectile, and tapped my ankle with his cane. My foot moved before the cane landed. Arthur's mouth curled. Too much talent. Poor manners. Worse posture. Excessive talent is my greatest flaw. Tessa covered her face with one hand. I'm leaving both of you here. Arthur pointed his cane toward the bureau. No, bring the arrogant brat. 20 minutes later, Arthur marched us into a training hall where several monitoring trainees were already waiting. Ryan Cole stood nearest the practice platform. He was a B-rank monitoring division trainee, Arthur's favored student, and the kind of man who wore seniority like body armor. Ryan looked at my D-rank badge. This is the searcher who found you? Arthur sat at the edge of the platform. He also gave the correct move. Ryan's smile thinned. On a board game? Arthur tapped his cane once. The room quieted. Awakening rank measures capacity, he told us. It tells you how much power the body received. It does not tell you what the person can force a weapon to become. He looked at Ryan first. What does a weapon require? Ryan answered without hesitation. Strength, speed, and complete technique. Several trainees nodded. Arthur turned to me. I had been checking the cracks around the practice floor. Will! The room laughed. Ryan laughed loudest. A D-rank answer. Arthur struck the floor with his cane. The sound stopped everyone. He is correct. Ryan's face changed before the laughter finished dying. The trainees who had laughed with him stopped looking at me and checked Arthur instead. One answer had moved the whole room. Ryan felt the shift before anyone said his name. Arthur continued. Strength moves the weapon. Technique controls it. Will decides what survives when both fail. Ryan folded his arms. Then let us prove it. There it was. He had turned one answer into a public contest because his status could not survive sharing oxygen with mine. Arthur smiled. Good. 2 ether stones were rolled onto reinforced stands. Each one was dense enough to absorb B-rank attacks without cracking. Arthur explained the prize. He would transmit 1 strike from Dragon King's spearmanship and its sword counterpart. Whoever broke the stone would become his direct disciple. I raised a hand. I should decline. Tessa stared at me. Arthur's eyebrow lifted. Why? I gestured toward the watching trainees. Respect for your existing students. Arthur tapped his cane. The winner becomes my direct disciple. I have reconsidered, I said. Tessa whispered, shameless. Efficient. Arthur released his aura. The pressure hit the room like a physical wall. Trainees dropped to one knee. Ryan locked both hands around his sword. My vision darkened at the edges. Then Arthur's technique entered through the pressure. Serene mind settled the panic first. Dragon King's spearmanship followed as a chain of movement, timing, breath, and intent. My body learned an attack my muscles had never performed. The system confirmed both skills. Serene mind acquired. Dragon King's spearmanship acquired. When the aura lifted, Ryan stepped forward before anyone else recovered. Tessa caught my elbow before my knees locked. Across the room, one trainee stayed on the floor and pretended he was checking the mat. Arthur's transmitted pressure had made the difference between our bodies painfully public. Ryan saw me lean on Tessa and mistook strain for weakness. His confidence came back all at once. He rolled his shoulders, drew his sword, and approached the stone while every trainee watched. He set his stance. The trainees called his name. He had the rank, the body, the training history, and the audience. Ryan struck. His inherited sword technique split the ether stone through the center. The stone broke into heavy chunks. One slid off the stand and struck the floor hard enough to shake the benches. The trainees cheered. 2 rushed forward to inspect the cut. Ryan lowered the sword and finally smiled again. One trainee called the strike perfect. Another asked whether Arthur had ever seen a cleaner break. Ryan let the praise build before looking at me. He wanted the room to decide the contest before my turn began. Arthur gave him one small nod. Ryan had chased that nod for years, and he stopped watching the cheering to hold on to it. The second ether stone still waited beside him. So did every trainee who had already decided my D-rank badge was the punchline. Then Ryan walked past me slowly. You found Master Kane. That doesn't make you worthy of stealing a senior's place. He was already calling it a senior's place. Fine, I would take it in front of him. Arthur looked at me. Your turn. I stepped toward the replacement stone. The new technique had shown me how to strike. It still needed the reason I carried a weapon. Years earlier, a bureau rescuer had reached me when everyone else had moved on. He carried me out and apologized for the people he could not save. That hand had given me hope before I had strength. I wanted my spear to do the same for someone else. The thought lasted one breath. Then I moved. Serene mind cleared the noise. Dragon King spearmanship pulled every line of force into the tip. I drove the spear forward and released Dragonfire Heartpiercer. The ether stone disappeared under the impact. Fragments struck the reinforced wall behind it. The training mat peeled back. Ryan's clean break suddenly looked like a participation trophy. Nobody cheered at first. A fragment rolled between Ryan's boots. He looked down at it, then back at the empty stand. The crowd checked the damage. Then they checked his face. Arthur walked through the dust, took my spear, inspected the tip, and handed it back without a joke. His mockery had vanished. Tessa stared at the crater. "You owe me the truth about that D-rank badge." "After beef," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Two desserts just became one." The trainees started shouting at once. Some crowded the ruined stand. Others watched Ryan hold his sword with both hands. Tessa stepped beside me and lowered her voice. "You understand, this makes you harder to hide." "I was doing a poor job already," I told her. She pointed at the crater. "You turned an ether stone into weather." I tapped my badge. "Still D-rank on paper." She glanced at the crater. "Paper is losing the argument." I walked over to Ryan. "Sorry." Ryan's eyes flashed. "For what?" "For stealing the spot." Arthur planted his cane between us before Ryan could answer. "Nolan Reed," Arthur announced. "You are my direct disciple." The room erupted. Every trainee heard Arthur name me. So much for staying invisible. The victory lasted exactly as long as victories in my life usually lasted. While the trainees crowded around me, Maya was being dragged from her home. I learned the sequence later from Maya, surviving witnesses, and the bureau record. Dylan Bishop led the group. He was a judge's son from Maya's school, and he had already helped bully another student into the hospital. Maya stepped between them, struck him while protecting the victim, and became his next target. His group caught her outside her building. Dylan slapped her when she fought back. Then they forced her into a vehicle with a hired B-rank bodyguard. They were taking her to Ashfall Quarantine Zone, a sealed monster area where ordinary police and witnesses could not follow. The Nepo bully treated his father's status, his money, and one B-rank protector like three perfect shields. I had just taken an S-rank master's disciple seat. By sunset, I would be walking into Ashfall to retrieve Maya. Dylan still thought those three shields could stop me. Minutes after Arthur named me his direct disciple, Tessa cornered me beside the ruined training floor. She tapped the plain spear I had chosen from Arthur's vault. "He offered you relic weapons. You picked the one that looks government-issued." I turned the shaft in my hand. "It has clean lines." Tessa squinted at it. "It has no lines." "You sound jealous," I told her. Tessa folded her arms. "I'm worried your weapon has more personality than you." That was flirting by monitoring division standards. Very hostile department. Then Maya's mother shoved through the training center doors. Her hair was loose. One shoe was missing. She grabbed my jacket before she found enough breath to speak. "They took Maya." The room disappeared around those three words. Maya's mother forced out the rest. Dylan Bishop and several classmates had dragged Maya into a vehicle. A hired hunter went with them. Their last signal pointed toward Ashfall Quarantine Zone. I called Evan Brooks while running. Evan was a combat division hunter and one of my bureau friends. He answered emergencies before asking which form I had forgotten. He unlocked the Ashfall barrier remotely and pushed a bureau file to my phone. "Dylan Bishop," Evan warned through my earpiece. "Son of State Supreme Court Justice Harold Bishop." Assault complaints vanished. Witnesses changed statements. His bodyguard is certified B rank. "Good," I told him. Evan went quiet. "That didn't sound good. It means I know which shield to break first." While Evan cleared my entry, Maya was already deep inside Ashfall. I learned what happened there from Maya, the surviving kidnappers, and the bureau record. Dylan had taken her beyond the patrol roads because cameras stopped at the barrier. He wanted her to fight monsters while his friends watched. He shoved a broken practice blade into her hands and pointed toward movement in the brush. His friends raised their phones. The bodyguard stood behind them like a locked door. Maya threw the blade at Dylan instead. It missed his face by inches. His friends laughed and Dylan's face hardened. Dylan slapped her and ordered the bodyguard to hold her still. Maya drove her heel into the man's shin, twisted free, and ran when the group crossed a ravine. The B-rank bodyguard caught her in 3 steps. He hooked her ankle with one foot and she hit the dirt hard. Dylan laughed and told her to stand up. "You wanted to act brave for that hospital girl. Show us." Maya pushed herself onto one knee. "She was stronger than you." That answer cost Dylan his smile. A shadow crossed the ground before he could hit her again. The first stinghawk dropped from the trees and struck one of Dylan's friends. The boy never got back up. 3 more winged monsters followed. Phones fell, the group scattered, and Dylan's little entertainment trip became a real survival problem. By the time I entered Ashfall, their screams had already drawn half the valley. Ashfall Quarantine Zone was packed with individually weak monsters. That description sounded comforting until 50 of them attacked together. Maya had no awakened body, no aura, and no time. Silent voice traced broken branches and distant impacts. Sixth sense kept pulling my attention toward the eastern lake. Then the Stinghawks found me. 6 dropped through the canopy. I speared the first through its dive and opened the king of the labyrinth sphere beneath the rest. 5 winged bodies vanished into my private labyrinth. Their red markers appeared on the living map. Bound ghouls rushed them. Red goblins closed side routes. I kept moving. Another pack came from the ridge. I pulled those in too. The first Stinghawks adapted before the second group landed. They climbed the corridor walls, dropped onto my ghouls from above, and used their wings to smash defenders into each other. A goblin squad trapped one beneath a closing gate. 2 more Stinghawks tore the gate from its track. Then a third wave arrived from the lake. I cut one from the air and dragged the rest through the sphere, their markers scattered across every open route. The living map filled with red wings. My defenders could trap a pack. A swarm turned every corridor into a blender. A ghoul marker vanished. Then a cluster of goblin markers disappeared together. A warning flashed over Mordrin's route. The winged monsters had already found the central approach. If one pack reached him and won, the sphere could release it stronger. Defender losses rising. Central route compromised. I could fight outside and let Maya's trail go cold. I could keep feeding the swarm into my dungeon and lose the whole place. Both options were garbage. So I chose the expensive third one. The eastern lake sat below the ridge. I sprinted downhill while the remaining Stinghawks followed overhead. The spear acted as a portal anchor. Wherever I opened it, that point connected to a chosen part of the labyrinth. I selected the corridor holding the swarm. Then I threw the invisible sphere into the lake. The portal opened underwater. A wall of lake water punched into my labyrinth. It swept Stinghawks into stone, flooded side corridors, and smashed through 2 damaged gates. Blue markers vanished with the red ones. My surviving defenders washed across the map. One entire trap hall cracked under the pressure. I closed the portal before the flood reached Mordrin's chamber. Inside the labyrinth, the flood slammed a Stinghawk pack against Mordrin's sealed route. Mordrin planted both hands against the boundary while water climbed his robes. "Your architecture is vulgar," he shouted through the map. "Keep the gate closed." A red goblin floated past him holding 2 stolen helmets and refused to drop either one. Even during a natural disaster, inventory theft remained the strongest part of our culture. The last red marker vanished under the current. I cut the portal before the pressure reached the boss chamber. The defenders who survived had bought me the only path that mattered, Maya's. Water settled across the lake. Every Stinghawk marker was gone. So were several walls I had recently paid to rebuild. The path to Maya was clear. Repairs could complain later. I followed blood, torn cloth, and one trail of crushed grass toward the northern rocks. Dylan's remaining group had been cornered beneath an overhang. His bodyguard swung an ether-coated blade while the others hid behind him. A Stinghawk slipped over his guard and dove toward Maya. I crossed the gap and drove my spear through its chest. A second Stinghawk came behind it. I ripped the spear free, turned the shaft across Maya's shoulder, and knocked the attacker into the bodyguard's abandoned shield. The shield folded around the monster. I finished it before it could rise. Maya stared at me for 1 second, then she ran into my arms. Her knees gave out before she reached me. I caught her under both arms. She pressed her face into my chest and tried to apologize for being heavy. She weighed almost nothing. The bruises did. She was breathing. The rest could wait. I checked her head, ribs, and wrists. Bruises covered both arms. Dirt streaked her face. She still tried to point past me. "Dylan did this," Maya said. "No." Dylan stepped out from behind his bodyguard as if the rescue had arrived for him. "Good," Dylan said. "Get us out. My father will compensate you." Maya tightened her grip on my jacket. "Leave him." The bodyguard moved between us. His blade shook from exhaustion, but the rank on his license was real. Dylan tried a smile. "Name your price." I looked at Maya. "I'm sorry." Eyes widened. "For what?" Tapped the side of her neck. Maya went limp against me. I lowered her behind a boulder and covered her with my rescue jacket. Dylan's smile returned. He misunderstood the apology. I stood and faced him. "I'm about to do something I don't want her watching." The smile died again. I read from the file Evan had sent while I walked toward him. Dylan Bishop, son of Justice Harold Bishop, 3 assault complaints withdrawn. 1 witness transferred schools. Another student spent 12 days in the hospital. Dylan glanced at the bodyguard. "He's threatening me." The bodyguard raised his sword. I kept walking. "Your father buried every complaint. Your money rented the hunter. You brought a schoolgirl into a monster zone so your friends could film her getting hurt." Dylan laughed once. It sounded forced. "You're a D-rank rescue worker. Do you understand who my father is?" "Yes." Kicked him in the chest. Dylan left the ground and hit the rock wall behind his bodyguard. The B-rank hunter attacked immediately. His sword came low, then snapped upward toward my ribs. Sixth sense showed the turn before his hips moved. I stepped inside the cut, trapped his wrist against the spear shaft and drove my shoulder into his chest. He staggered. I struck his knee, took the sword from his hand and buried the hilt in his jaw. The bodyguard hit the dirt. He tried to rise. I planted one foot on his wrist. His aura pushed against me. It felt ordinary. 2 weeks earlier, B-rank power would have been a wall. Now the man beneath me could not move my boot. The bodyguard stared at the D-rank badge clipped to my belt. "What are you?" "Busy." Struck the side of his neck and put him down. Dylan crawled toward the dropped sword. I kicked it away. He grabbed a rock instead and swung at my head. I caught his wrist. Dylan spat through split lips. "People like her get hurt because they don't know their place. If you have no money and no power, that's your problem." There it was. No panic, no regret. He still thought the world had failed by letting me touch him. I twisted his wrist until the rock fell. Then I hit him until he stopped trying to stand. The bodyguard remained unconscious. Dylan's surviving friends had already fled toward the barrier. The woods had gone quiet around us. Quiet inside Ashfall meant the hunters had arrived, or the predators had started listening. A low growl came from the trees. Dylan heard it too. He looked past me and finally sounded his age. "Take me with you," lifted Maya into my arms. Dylan crawled after us. "My father will give you anything. You already showed me what his money buys." 3 wolves stepped from the brush. They had followed the blood and the stinghawk bodies. Dylan reached for my ankle. I stepped away. "You're a rescuer," he cried. "I rescued Maya." I carried her toward the barrier. His screaming followed us through the trees. Then the wolves drowned it out. By morning, Maya was home with her mother. Her mother opened the door before I reached the steps. She took Maya from my arms, checked her face, then grabbed the front of my ruined shirt with her free hand. "Thank you," she said once. That was enough. I left before the neighbors could turn the rescue into a ceremony. The officials who sold Dylan access to Ashfall lost their badges. The surviving videos reached the news before Justice Bishop's office could bury them. Harold Bishop resigned after the public learned how many complaints his influence had erased. The Zone had already delivered Dylan's consequence. The later investigation only exposed the people who enabled him. I returned to my private labyrinth after Maya woke. The place looked like the world's most expensive birdbath. Goblins pulled debris from flooded corridors. Mordrin stood ankle-deep in water and judged me with his entire dead face. Then the Hunter Awakening system opened a new quest. Target, Queen Scepter, time limit, 30 days. An image showed the black and gold apex hornet I had glimpsed above the Ashfall Lake. Its nest had produced the Stinghawk's territorial panic. The system had watched me drown one swarm and decided I needed more insects. Vacation denied. The next morning, Marcus found me at headquarters with 3 unfinished reports. He looked like a man who had finally located his problem. He held up the forms. "Sit." I looked at the 30-day Queen Scepter timer floating in my vision. Then I looked at the door. Marcus followed my eyes. "Nolan, paperwork is my final boss." I ran. With the Queen timer moving, Arthur started my real disciple training at the National Combat Arts Institute. He met me in the courtyard wearing a sleeveless training shirt. The old man had the shoulders of an anime grandpa who had discovered protein powder and taken it personally. A black jawbone rested on the stone floor between us. It was wider than my chest, hinged at the back, and lined with iron teeth. Arthur tapped it with his cane. "Iron Fiend Jawbone, the beast that carried this nearly killed me." Comforting introduction. "Open it." I crouched, gripped both halves, and pulled. Nothing moved. I planted my feet harder and pushed every bit of my new strength into my arms. The jawbone stayed closed. Arthur watched my face turn red with the calm interest of a man observing a kettle. I released it before my shoulders tore. Arthur nodded once. "No next stage until it opens. That thing weighs more than my apartment. Then stop renting weakness." Mentors were just bullies with lesson plans. Logan Pierce watched from the edge of the courtyard. Logan was one of Arthur's senior institute trainees. He had expected the direct disciple seat to go to someone who had spent years earning it. Then I arrived with one plain spear, destroyed the test, and took the place in an afternoon. He hated me with excellent posture. The first morning, I swept the training floor before touching the jawbone. Logan arrived early and found me already pulling. At noon, one trainee tore both palms. I handed him my spare wraps and went back to the hinge bare-handed. By evening, the others had left. Logan returned for a forgotten bag and found me still there, shaking over the same piece of iron. He leaned against the gate. "You can stop performing. Master Kane isn't watching." "No," Logan looked at the jawbone. "That makes it worse." "Thank you," I said. Logan stared at me. "That wasn't praise? I'm counting it." The next day repeated, except the hinge made a sound. I wrapped the hinge with a chain and braced one foot against the lower jaw. Then I pulled until the links cut through my gloves. The jaw opened a fraction, snapped shut, and caught the edge of my sleeve. Logan cut the fabric free before the teeth reached my wrist. "You nearly lost a hand," Logan said. I flexed the wrist. "That would reduce my pulling efficiency." Logan shoved the torn sleeve at me. You make concern difficult. He walked away angry at me for giving him a reason to care. Honestly, fair. A week later, the upper tooth moved the width of a coin. Logan saw it. His eyes snapped to the gap before I lost my grip and the jaw slammed shut. He walked over, handed me a bottle of water, and dropped the formal distance from his voice. You're a training psychopath. I drank half the bottle. Senior disciple is still available. You stole the title. Then steal it back. The Dominion deployment horn sounded beyond the eastern ridge. Logan's hand tightened around the empty bottle. That convoy belongs to Dominion, he said. I used to work for them. The words came out flat. The rest came later, through Logan, injured guild hunters, and transport footage the Bureau recovered. Dominion had found a steel blood orc carrying a tribal restraint necklace. The creature was unique, powerful, and worth a fortune alive. The capture team called the necklace junk. One hunter cut it off and threw it into the road. The orc woke before the convoy reached the city. It crushed the covered cage, tore through the escort team, and chased the transport toward the Institute. Dominion survivors abandoned their wounded and ran. Rescue division trucks collected the people the profitable hunters had left behind. That evening, Marcus called about the team dinner I had promised to attend. I looked across the Institute courtyard. Arthur was away. Dozens of trainees were still practicing under Logan's supervision. I can't make it, I told Marcus. Marcus went silent. You skipped beef? I promised to watch the students. Who are you, and what did the dungeon do with Nolan? The emergency alarm answered before I could. 3-star monster breach, National Combat Arts Institute. The restraint token hit the ground, and the orc hit everything else. Abandoned Dominion vehicles already blocked the emergency road. Injured guild hunters lay beside them while rescue crews worked without the people who had created the mess. One hunter still clutched the discarded restraint necklace. He kept saying the orc had been calm until Dominion cut it free. The necklace had protected everyone. Prophet had looked at it and seen trash. I crossed the last block on foot. I reached the outer wall while students were pouring through the lower gate. The steel-blood orc stood in the main courtyard, taller than the training hall doors. Broken chains hung from both arms. Its armor looked grown into its skin. Logan was still inside. He had tied a training rope across the eastern hall and was sending students through in groups of 6. Every time the orc turned toward them, Logan struck the damaged armor and dragged its attention back. His practice sword had already cracked. His left arm hung lower than the right. He kept counting students anyway. He held a practice sword in one hand and kept himself between the orc and 6 injured trainees. One student yelled for him to run. Logan did not move. Later, he told me exactly why. Dominion had taught him that strong people used the weak and discarded them. Years earlier, a Bureau rescuer had pulled him from a collapsed gate anyway. Logan had spent years trying to become the kind of person who stayed. So he stayed. The orc raised one arm. I crossed the roof, jumped through the damaged skylight, and landed between Logan and the strike. The impact cracked the floor beneath my boots. Logan stared. Senior? You've done enough, I told him. I'll take it from here. I opened the king of the labyrinth sphere around the orc and myself. The courtyard vanished. We crashed into my private labyrinth beside a reinforced corridor. For half a second, I felt extremely cool. Then the steel-blood orc grabbed me by the jacket and threw me through a wall. I regretted the entrance immediately. Blue markers converged on the intruder. Red goblins attacked from side halls. Bound ghouls rushed its legs. The orc hit once. 3 markers vanished. It tore a goblin from its shoulder and smashed another into the floor. Then it walked through a closing gate before the hinges finished moving. Normal defenders were feeding it momentum. I changed the routes, dropped gates, and split the defenders into smaller strikes. The orc ignored the maze's intimidation entirely. It broke a wall to avoid a corner and used the falling stone to crush 2 ghouls. One goblin leaped onto its back and drove a stolen blade into the old curse wound. The orc tore it free and kept walking. Blue markers vanished faster than I could move them, so I opened Mordrin's boss route. Mordrin stepped into the corridor with curses circling both hands. He saw the orc, then looked at me. Mordrin raised both cursed hands. You bring filth into my temple. It's our temple now, I told him. His dead faces twisted. I reject the word our. The orc charged him. Mordrin's first curse blackened half its chest. The second locked one leg and forced the monster to its knee. For one glorious second, my dead employee looked smug. Then the orc ripped the cursed flesh from its own body, lunged through the pain, and caught Mordrin by the throat. Mordrin drove both hands into its face. Dark fire filled the chamber. The orc kept squeezing. Mordrin's body started breaking into black ash. He still forced one last curse into the wound on the orc's chest. Architect, he rasped, do not let this animal leave my chamber. It was the closest thing Mordrin had ever given me to trust. The orc slammed him into the floor. A system warning flashed across the living map. Labyrinth boss eliminated. Defender respawn disabled. Mordrin's marker vanished. The ghouls that had already fallen stayed gone. Mordrin had tried to turn me into a corpse. He had complained through every order. He was still my boss inside my dungeon, and the orc had folded him in his own chamber. I took that personally. The reinforced kill zone waited one corridor away. I dragged the steel blood orc inside and triggered Hail of Steel. Ether-coated spikes hammered the orc from one side and drove it beneath the suspended slab. Then I dropped the spike ceiling. The stone crashed down hard enough to split the corridor floor. Dust swallowed the chamber. The orc's markers stopped moving. For a moment, I thought the fight was over. The system ruined the moment. Labyrinth durability, 62%. Dissolution threshold, below 60% or 0 living defenders. A fist punched through the fallen ceiling. The steel blood orc dragged itself from the wreckage. Half its armor was broken. It came out furious and still moving. Terrible combination. It struck the next wall. Durability dropped again. One more broken corridor could dissolve my private dungeon with every surviving monster inside. I grabbed the orc's chain and opened the sphere around us. We crashed back into the institute courtyard. Logan had cleared the remaining students through the lower gate. The only people left nearby were injured trainees crawling toward cover. The orc swung at me. This time, I stayed inside its reach. Its fist passed over my shoulder. I drove the spear butt into its elbow, turned beneath the return swing, and cut across the broken armor along its ribs. 2 weeks of losing to the jawbone had changed my body. My legs held under impacts that would have folded me before. My shoulders carried Arthur's spear forms with less strain. The orc tried to grab me. I braced the spear across both palms and stopped its hand inches from my face. That would have been impossible 2 weeks earlier. It was barely possible now. I shoved the hand aside and drove Dragonfire Heartpiercer into the wound my traps had opened. The orc staggered. Injured trainees at the gate saw it move backward and stopped crawling long enough to stare. Then the monster roared, seized the spear shaft, and snapped it in both hands. The plain weapon Tessa had mocked lasted exactly until I needed it most. Tragic. The backhand caught my chest and threw me across the courtyard. I hit beside the Iron Fiend jawbone. The orc charged. Logan came from its blind side and drove his practice blade through the damaged arm. The monster turned and smashed him into the stone steps. Logan went still. That opening cost him everything he had left. I grabbed the Iron Fiend jawbone. The orc reached for my head. I planted one half against its neck and pulled the other with both hands. The hinges resisted. My arms started failing. Then I saw Logan beneath the broken steps and the students behind the gate. I pulled harder. The jawbone opened. For the first time, the Iron Fiend's teeth spread wide enough to take the orc's head between them. I slammed both halves shut. The jaws snapped through the hardened neck. The steel-blood orc's head hit the courtyard, and the body followed. For one beat, the entire institute went silent. Then the injured trainees behind the gate started shouting. One pointed at the jawbone around the severed neck. Another stared at the D-rank badge on my belt as if the letters had personally lied to him. Arthur's impossible first stage had just closed around the monster Dominion could not transport. The system confirmed the kill. Training stage advanced. A black weapon formed above the corpse and dropped into my hand. Unique item acquired, demonic dagger. Sealed effect Roga. Unlocks under a will-driven crisis. Useful later. Very dramatic now. I left the dagger at my belt and reached Logan. His pulse was weak. I broke the emergency recovery ampule from my field kit and pressed it to his neck. Color returned slowly to his face. Logan opened one eye. Good, I told him. You still have 8 lives. He stared at me through the pain. Then I repeated the words from the courtyard. You've done enough. I'll take it from here. Logan's hand caught my sleeve. That was you, he whispered. Years ago, the Bureau rescuer in the collapsed gate. I remembered a younger hunter under broken stone. I had carried him out before the second collapse. Logan laughed once and immediately regretted it. I thought you stole Master Kane's seat, he admitted. Then you cleaned the floors, trained before me, stayed after me, and gave your raps away. Kept waiting for the act to end. Logan's fingers tightened around my sleeve. Dominion taught me that strong people use the weak and throw them away. I believed it until you pulled me out of that ruined gate. It was an excellent act, I told him. Logan breathed through the pain. You're still unbearable. I tapped his hand. 8 lives. Logan tightened his grip. Senior. The healers reached us seconds later. Several students at the gate heard him. The trainee who had mocked my broom lowered his head first. Other trainees followed. Logan released my sleeve and pointed the healers toward the injured students before himself. The steel blood orc was dead. The students were safe. Logan had stopped looking at me like a thief. Then cameras appeared beyond the broken gate. Reporters had arrived before Arthur, before repairs, and before Dominion accepted blame for the monster it stole. Victor Sloan stepped out behind them with a prepared statement and the expression of a man about to lie in high definition. The next morning, Victor Sloan held a press conference outside Federal Hunter Bureau headquarters. Dominion's stolen orc had destroyed part of the institute, killed my labyrinth boss, and nearly erased my private dungeon. Victor arrived in a perfect suit and called the operation charitable research. He claimed Dominion had captured the Steelblood orc for donation to a public training program. He praised the injured hunters, promised an internal review, and never once used the word profit. The old peacock had discovered cameras. Humanity suffered. Reporters crowded the front steps. Families from the institute waited behind the barriers, listening to the guild that had dropped a monster beside their children explain generosity. A live streamer near the barrier blamed the rescue division for responding too slowly. Marcus stood beside me and heard the accusation. "Don't," Marcus warned. "I kept watching the streamer. I haven't moved." Marcus caught my sleeve. "Your face moved." The streamer pointed toward the cameras. "Federal rescue officers allowed an unstable monster to reach a training campus. Dominion has offered resources while the Bureau avoids accountability." Victor gave him a small approving nod. Marcus caught my sleeve. "Nolan." I stepped into the live frame. The streamer tried to block me with one arm. "This is a private broadcast, then stop filming on federal steps." His arm lowered. Victor's smile held. "The officer is emotional after a difficult rescue." The streamer looked at my badge. "You were present at the scene? Killed the monster." His eyes flicked toward Victor for help. "You're registered D rank. The orc didn't check." A few people behind the barrier laughed. Victor did not. I looked into the camera. Dominion captured the Steelblood orc for profit. Their team cut off its restraint token, abandoned injured hunters, and drove the monster toward a school. The live streamer cut in. "Those claims remain unverified." I pointed at Victor. "His transport footage is already with the Bureau. Ask why his charity used a covered cage and kept moving after hunters went down." Several reporters turned toward Victor. His smile tightened. "Dominion followed every lawful safety standard available during an emergency." Mother behind the barrier shouted, "Your emergency hit my son's classroom." Victor's security team moved toward her. The cameras moved faster. They stopped. I kept going. Guilds like Dominion create disasters, leave rescue workers to collect the bodies, then hire a camera to complain about the cleanup. The streamer raised his microphone. "Dominion funds more public defense than the entire rescue division. Money didn't stand between that orc and the students. Logan Pierce did. Dominion had already thrown him away once." Victor stepped closer. "You should remember your rank before accusing people above you." There it was. The ugly part finally came out without media training. I tapped the D rank badge on my chest. "This badge reached the students your guild left behind." The livestream comments started moving too fast to read. One reporter asked who expected to profit. Another asked why the restraint token had been removed. The paid streamer tried to end the broadcast and discovered his own viewers had already clipped everything. Within a minute, reporters stopped questioning me and turned on Victor. A father from the institute held up a picture of the classroom wall the orc had broken. Another family shouted Logan's name when I mentioned him. The crowd had arrived ready to hear a guild apology. Victor had given them a rank insult instead. The live streamer tried to redirect the questions toward Bureau response times. His own comment feed filled with clips of Dominion hunters abandoning the convoy. The camera stayed live while his story collapsed around him. Marcus grabbed my hair from behind. "Interview over," he announced. He dragged me out of frame while I walked backward. "Careful," I told him. "That's government property. Your hair is the only handle you left me." The call-out clip spread before we reached the lobby. The hair drag clip spread just as fast. Public victory. Career disaster. Excellent balance. An ArcForge Guild account requested the uncut rescue footage that afternoon. Logan sent one message from the institute. "You pointed at him on live television." I replied, "He was standing there." The mother who had shouted from behind the barrier posted the transport footage beside pictures of the damaged classroom. Institute trainees added their own clips. Victor's polished statement kept losing to people who had actually been there. By evening, the old peacock could no longer call it one angry rescue worker. The audience had become witnesses. The request carried Elliot Gray's verified mark. Elliot was one of the country's best item makers, so I assumed he wanted clean combat angles for research. I approved the footage request and forgot about it. Victor did not forget anything. He demanded punishment before the day ended. I wasn't inside the meeting. Marcus and director Malcolm Shaw told me enough afterward to reconstruct the useful part. Victor entered Malcolm's office asking for my suspension, a public apology, and removal from active duty. Marcus placed my field record on the desk. "Nolan's recent rescue success rate is 100%. Victor dismissed the file. "He is an insubordinate D-rank employee." Marcus added the Ashfall Rescue, the hotel, and the Temple Gate. Every time somebody profitable failed, that D-rank brought people home. Malcolm closed the report and asked one question. "How many civilians did Nolan lose?" Victor had no number. Malcolm answered for him. "0 in this file. I won't throw away that result to repair your press conference." Victor left without the suspension, apology, or sacrifice he had ordered. He did create enough pressure for Malcolm to move me. After Marcus pulled me off camera, Malcolm called me upstairs. His office was spare, and the tea was good enough to make bad news suspicious. Malcolm poured a cup. "Sit." I looked at the tea. Am I being fired or opening a cafe? Malcolm pushed the cup toward me. Drink before you become dramatic. I was dragged by my hair on live television, I reminded him. Malcolm took his own cup. That was Marcus preventing a second statement. Malcolm slid my field record across the desk. Every recent mission carried the same result. Civilians recovered, objective completed. Then he asked the dangerous question. If I ordered a new rank test today, what would it show? My hand moved toward the invisible sphere before I stopped it, explaining the class would place my dungeon, captured monsters, and every future trap inside a federal file. Malcolm raised one hand. I don't need your secret. I looked up. He tapped the record. I need to know whether your public rank limits where I can send you. It doesn't. Good. He slid a 6-month command dispatch across the desk. A remote branch would put distance between Dominion and my daily orders. It would also remove Marcus when my decisions got ugly. They already get ugly, I said. I've noticed. Malcolm warned that the posting still required visible results. Protection without performance would become real exile very quickly. Malcolm opened 3 branch summaries. 2 were quiet postings where Dominion pressure would fade. The third showed repeated gate failures, missing rescue staff, and an island that had stopped expecting help. Which one needs a searcher most? I asked. Malcolm tapped Blackwater Island. This one needs a miracle. It also eats replacements. Send me there. He studied me over the tea. Most people ask which posting is safest. Most people should not wear rescue badges. Then he placed a second page over the dispatch. Command authority requires senior grade, Malcolm said. The grade line was blank. His pen waited beside it. I can fix that. I signed before he finished his tea. When I left Malcolm's office, Victor was waiting in the hallway with Ryan Cole. Ryan was the B-rank rival who had lost Arthur's disciple seat to me. He carried a bureau folder and studied the floor. Victor stepped into my path. You've become an irritating little problem, Reed. Countryside duty should solve that. You started waiting outside my meetings. Should I be worried you're stalking me? Ryan coughed into his fist. Victor ignored him. The Bureau is sending you away because you embarrassed it. Remote branches are where troublesome employees disappear. Reporters still waited near the elevators. Victor noticed them and raised his voice. He wanted witnesses for the burial. 6 months away from headquarters, he announced. By the time you return, nobody here will remember the noise you made. I let him finish. Then I held up the order. You missed a line. Victor glanced at the page. I read it for him. Senior Rescue Officer, 2-grade promotion, 6-month command dispatch. Ryan looked up. Victor took the paper and checked the title twice. You said department heads get dispatched, I reminded him. Congratulations, you understood one part. His fingers tightened around the page. I took it back. The Bureau is desperate to keep real talent. Very flattering, honestly. Victor's smile had stopped working. He lowered his voice. Blackwater will bury you. No location stops me from rescuing people. A reporter near the elevators heard that line and lifted her camera. Victor noticed too late. I held out my hand. Senior officers usually receive congratulations. Ryan turned away before his face betrayed him. Victor stared at my hand, the cameras, and the promotion order. Then the old peacock shook it. Congratulations, he forced out. Camera shutters snapped through the whole handshake. Ryan stared at our hands, then at Victor's face. The B-rank coordinator had watched me take Arthur's seat and now watched Victor decorate the exile he had demanded. I held the handshake 1 second longer than necessary. Petty timing is still timing. Beautiful. Just beautiful. Ryan told me later that Victor punched a hallway wall after I left. The wall kept its rank. My original rescue team reacted worse than Victor did. Marcus read the Blackwater line, closed his eyes, and counted to 5. You chose the branch with an active sea monster warning, Marcus said. I folded the report. It was available. Marcus rubbed his forehead. So is common sense. You keep declining that assignment. Marcus called an emergency dinner. The healer threatened to hide my ferry ticket. 2 hunters argued over which one could replace my search route and accidentally proved neither could. Marcus handed me the report he had thrown at the ferry. Finish this before you leave. I checked the title. It was the Temple Incident Report. I held up the report. You carried this through 3 disasters? Marcus folded his arms. I have faith. I tapped the title. In paperwork? In eventually cornering you, Marcus said. The healer pushed an extra plate toward me without speaking. The team had spent years treating my search routes like a safety net. Now they were watching the net board a ferry. I ate the first bite before anyone could make the moment respectable. Tessa inspected the new badge over dessert. Senior Rescue Officer, does this mean your spear gets a personality now? The spear died. Tessa paused. You broke the government-looking one? The orc broke it. That's the most interesting thing it ever did. My team asked what I planned to do during the week before Blackwater. Overdue homework, I told them. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Actual paperwork? I checked the Queen's Scepter timer. 3 days remained. Something worse. I thought Queen's Scepter was the last monster between me and Blackwater. The ocean had already started moving. With 3 days left, I found Queen Scepter's nest beneath the same ashfall ridge I had flooded. The private labyrinth had no boss, no respawning defenders, and several corridors still held water damage. Perfect conditions for attacking an apex hornet colony. I opened the sphere at the mouth of the nest. The first swarmfits came out firing. Swarmfits were Queen Scepter's elite hornets. Each was smaller than the stinghawks, faster in tight spaces, and able to launch hardened stingers like bullets. The first volley hit the stone behind me before I saw their wings move. I opened a side route into the labyrinth. 3 swarmfits crossed the boundary and vanished. The next group adapted. They landed, drove their legs into the ground, and anchored themselves so the sphere's pull could not lift them. Tiny brains, I told them. Annoyingly functional. One fired at my mouth. Talking to monsters remained a poor management strategy. I rolled behind a broken pillar and used silent voice to map the nest through the stone. Hundreds of wing beats filled the tunnels. One larger rhythm stayed near the center and changed every time I moved. Queen Scepter was steering me toward the central chamber. She was coordinating the entire colony. Every time I closed a route, the larger rhythm changed and 3 smaller groups shifted with it. The queen was reading my pressure through the nest. She gave up one tunnel to trap me in the next. A swarmfit volley shredded the pillar beside my head. Another group crawled under the smoke instead of flying through it. These bugs had strategy meetings. I hated how professional they were. I opened the sphere beneath a side tunnel, let the first squad commit, then closed the route behind them. Inside the labyrinth, red goblins baited the hornets past damaged walls while the surviving ghouls attacked from blind corners. I triggered one wall launcher and cleared another passage. Every trap cost mana. Every captured hornet cost defenders. The queen had more bodies than I had budget, so I stopped clearing tunnels and drove toward the central chamber. Queen Scepter climbed from the nest core in black and gold armor. Her body was longer than a car, and every plate overlapped without a visible gap. The air changed when she spread her wings. Then she called her guardian. Winglash dropped from the ceiling. The creature had 4 cutting wings and forelegs shaped like hooked blades. Sixth Sense screamed before it moved. I opened the sphere under it. Space bent. Winglash lost one leg to the pull, then the creature cut off its own arm and escaped the boundary before the rest of its body vanished. The severed limb fell into my labyrinth alone. I stared at Winglash. Winglash stared back. Look, the bug had just amputated itself to escape my trap. The negotiation phase was over. Queen Scepter fired a command pulse. Swarmfits filled the side tunnels and locked their legs into the ground. Winglash blocked the only open path. I had 1 damaged army, 1 empty boss chamber, and 2 monsters built to protect each other, so I made the reckless choice. I widened the sphere beneath both of them. Winglash lunged for me. Queen Scepter tried to anchor through the nest floor. The floor disappeared first. Guardian and Queen dropped together into my private labyrinth. The impact shook every remaining corridor. Winglash landed on its feet. Queen Scepter hit one wall, recovered before the dust settled, and ordered the trapped swarmfits to attack the map boundaries from outside. My dungeon was fighting a queen inside while her colony tried to break the door from the other side. Clean Solutions had left the building. Their markers landed in the rebuilt kill zone. Winglash attacked before the map finished updating. It cut through one launcher, tore open a ceiling trap, and shoved Queen Scepter behind its own body. The Guardian had seen my first trap pattern outside. It expected the attack from one direction. That expectation had killed Mordrin. I had rebuilt Hail of Steel accordingly. The first volley came from the left wall. Winglash spread all 4 cutting wings and knocked the spikes aside. Steel filled the floor around it without reaching the queen. The Guardian screamed in triumph. I activated the second pattern. Launchers opened in every wall, the ceiling, and the floor. Winglash blocked the front. Steel came from behind. It twisted right. Spikes came from above. It folded one wing around the queen. The floor fired through the opening. The barrage tore Winglash apart from 6 directions. Its marker vanished beneath Queen Scepter's feet. The surviving goblins watched from sealed side routes. One had stolen a metal shield from the repair pile. It raised the shield over its head even though the steel was hitting the other room. Queen Scepter struck the floor hard enough to crack it. The Guardian had bought her one final attack, and absolutely no exit. The queen stepped over the body and charged me herself. Hail of Steel hammered her armor and shattered, the plates barely marked. She pinned my jacket beneath one hooked leg and drove her stinger toward my chest. Sixth Sense showed the line. I rotated the floor block beneath us. Her stinger hit stone where my heart had been. I rolled free and triggered an explosive tile under her side. The blast lifted one armor plate. There. One pale seam opened beneath it. Queen Scepter turned to shield the gap. I grabbed a broken steel shaft from the trap floor and pushed Serene Mind through the pane. Dragon King spearmanship pulled every line of force into the improvised weapon. The shaft burned red in my hands. I stepped through the next stinger strike and drove Crimson Lotus into the exposed seam. The technique punched past the armor and burned through the queen's core. Her stinger still came down. I released the broken shaft and caught the hooked limb with both hands. Crimson Lotus burned deeper while I held the stinger away from my throat. The queen's command pulse shattered. Across the nest, swarmfits lost formation and collided with one another. The intelligence holding the colony together had just gone dark. Queen Scepter staggered across the platform. Her remaining swarmfits stopped moving on the living map. Then the queen fell beside Winglash. Quest complete. 3 days became 0 with several hours to spare. I had told Victor no location would stop me from rescuing people. Stronger monsters could force me backward. I would still return and finish the job. The system dropped the poison stinger first. It was longer than my arm and carried enough venom to make the demonic dagger react from across the floor. Then a gold-black mass formed above the queen's body. Queen Scepter's royal jelly acquired. The system promised a larger mana reserve and warned about an unknown constitution effect. I read the warning twice, then I ate it anyway. In my defense, I had just thrown myself into a hornet nest. Caution had already left the group chat. The royal jelly hit my stomach like liquid fire. Mana tore through my chest, arms, and spine. I used Serene Mind to hold the flow together and forced it through every channel Arthur had trained. The private labyrinth answered. Every trapline flared at once. Goblins dropped whatever they had stolen and ran from the walls. Even the surviving ghouls lowered themselves as the pressure swept through the maze. Then the number appeared. Maximum mana increased by 390. My old reserve treated every major trap like rent day. The new reserve could keep an actual army active outside the dungeon. A second notice followed. Late Bloom Charm Constitution acquired. The system gave no useful explanation. Future Nolan could suffer that problem. Future Nolan was about 2 hours away. Queen Scepter's death opened a circular chamber beneath the maze. Dark water filled a stone basin. One prompt waited above it. Designate monster remains. Mordrin's chamber was empty. Respawning remained disabled. I needed a new boss and defenders that could grow without emptying my gold every morning, so I dragged the queen's nest into the lake of decay. The basin transferred stored experience and traits into the monsters I designated. One sentence. Very suspicious feature. The wax dissolved. Surviving eggs floated to the surface while dark mana moved between them. Every goblin in the chamber backed away from the largest egg. Good judgment from the goblins. Rare but welcome. The egg absorbed the queen's command instinct, Winglash's speed, and the strongest poison stored in the nest. The shell split. A black hornet climbed out, larger than a person and sharp enough to make my remaining defenders reconsider employment. It tested its wings and vanished from the basin. Sixth Sense caught it behind me a heartbeat later. I turned slowly. You're the new boss. The hornet tilted its head. Vespa. It clicked its jaws once. I'll bring you prey. Vespa spread its wings. The goblins moved farther away. My army had a commander again. The commander already looked expensive. After the quest, Evan and Tessa forced me to take one normal evening at a barbecue. For the first time in weeks, nobody was screaming, bleeding, or asking me to explain missing monster bodies. I sat beside a hot grill and briefly understood why normal people liked evenings. Evan ruined the peace with a question. Evan turned meat over the grill. What did you do during your week off? I fed an exotic pet and retook my rank test. Evan stopped turning the meat. You slipped a rank test between pet feeding and dinner? The result is pending. Try not to build a shrine yet. Tessa watched me over her drink. Your exotic pet is why your jacket has stinger holes? It gets excited. Evan glanced around the restaurant. Why is everyone staring at us? I looked at him seriously. You finally became handsome. Evan lowered the tongs. I knew discipline would pay. Tessa opened her mouth to insult both of us. Then blood ran from her nose. She froze. I reached for a napkin. Tessa? Her eyes stayed on my face. The color climbed across her cheeks. You look... She stopped, covered her nose and tried again. This is medically offensive. Then she leaned forward and knocked herself out on the table. Evan caught the grill tongs before they fell into the fire. I caught Tessa. A woman from the next table approached during the panic. I expected her to offer help. She held out her phone. Can I get your number? I looked down at the unconscious Tessa in my arms. The stranger followed my eyes. Bad timing? Historically impressive timing. She left her number on a napkin anyway. That answered the Constitution question. The royal jelly had created an aura that dulled panic and amplified attraction already present. Choice remained intact, and controlling the effect was my responsibility. When Tessa woke, she sat upright so quickly that the table shook. Evan handed her a clean napkin. You lost a fight with Nolan's face. Tessa pressed the napkin to her nose and glared at me. My heart started racing. For about 10 seconds, I may have fallen for you. You should see a doctor. She kicked my shin under the table. There. Cured. I suppressed the aura as far as I could. The staring eased. Tessa checked my face again, then looked away on purpose. Better, Tessa said. I leaned closer. Disappointing? She pushed me back with 2 fingers. Don't get ambitious. One normal evening had lasted 12 minutes. New personal record. Before I left for Blackwater, Malcolm called me back to headquarters. He placed a sealed rank result on his desk. Your reevaluation measured 7.5, Malcolm said. The public S rank cutoff is 7.8. I checked the number twice. My badge still read D rank. Malcolm collected the page. That contradiction will attract every guild in the country. I'm keeping the result private until you decide you're ready. He slid my D rank badge beside the sealed result. The two objects looked ridiculous together. Publicly, you still search routes, Malcolm said. Privately, you are 3/10 below S rank. I pocketed the badge. I've had worse identity problems this week. Malcolm glanced at the sealed result. The hornet? The dating problem, I said. Malcolm put the badge back in my hand. Control both. I thought about Victor, the private labyrinth, Vespa, and the aura I had barely controlled over dinner. Keep it sealed, Malcolm nodded. I left headquarters with a monster commander, almost S-rank output, and orders for the least safe island in the country. Blackwater was going to hate me. The morning I left for Blackwater Island, Marcus chased me to the docks with an unfinished incident report. I reached the boarding ramp first. Marcus raised the folder over his head. You cannot outrun federal paperwork. The ferry horn sounded. I don't need to, I called back. The boat can. He threw the folder. I caught it, saluted with the evidence, and stepped aboard as the ramp lifted. Paperwork remained undefeated. It had simply missed the ferry. A boy near the rail watched the mainland shrink behind us. Jamie Foster was traveling with his grandmother, Mrs. Foster. They were returning to Blackwater to visit his parents' graves. Jamie looked at my bureau jacket. Are you the new rescue chief? Apparently. Mrs. Foster touched his shoulder. Don't interrogate the officer. He looks young. I am standing right here. Jamie studied the D-rank badge. Blackwater is dangerous. Good warning. Slightly late. His face stayed serious. The island had frequent active gates, too few hunters, and years of cut subsidies. People with money left. Everyone else learned where the nearest shelter was. Why stay? I asked. Jamie looked toward the dark shape of the island. It's home. That answer killed the joke. A shadow moved beneath the ferry. Sixth sense hit me so hard I grabbed the rail. The ocean rose beside us. A tentacle thicker than the ferry mast broke the surface and slammed down close enough to throw spray across the upper deck. Passengers screamed. The captain turned the vessel while I ran toward the impact side. The tentacle vanished before I reached it. A new system order opened across my vision. Kraken awakening detected. Subjugate before full emergence. Failure restriction, departure from the Blackwater area denied. The system had trapped me on the island until the Kraken died. I looked at Jamie and Mrs. Foster holding the rail together. I had already planned to stay. The next morning, Sam Keller walked me into the card game they called an office. Sam was the Blackwater Rescue Division healer. He had tired eyes and a clean medical pack. His careful voice belonged to a man who had spent years apologizing for other people's failures. 7 hunters were out on patrol. The rest were gambling around a scarred card table beneath route maps that had not been updated in months. Empty bottles filled one corner. Broken gear filled another. The equipment shelves had more dust than mana stones. A defense grid key hung behind glass beside branch manager Curtis Vale's office. 4 former rescue chiefs had left their nameplates in a drawer, each one scratched out. Sam said none had lasted long enough to learn every shelter route. Curtis controlled the grid, the inventory, and the signatures. The branch controlled almost nothing except the people still showing up. Sam saw me looking. Patrols bring valuable stones back. Manager Vale's office collects them for central allocation. We never see them again. The empty shelf delivered Malcolm's warning in one glance. Curtis had been taking the branch's mana stones. The gamblers noticed us. One veteran lifted a bottle. Headquarters sent the mouthy D rank from the live stream. Another hunter laughed. Welcome to exile. Broad man at the card table did not laugh. Trevor Vale was the local enforcer, and Curtis Vale's younger brother. He looked at the senior badge on my jacket, then at the chief's desk behind me. That post was supposed to be mine, Trevor said. I placed my bag down. Then this is awkward. The veteran held the bottle toward me. Have a drink before you start giving orders. I took it. Then I smashed it across the card table. Cards jumped. Glass scattered. Every chair stopped moving. Clean the building, I said. Inventory the gear. Patrol reports go on the wall. On the clock, you work rescue. One hunter looked toward Curtis's office. Another looked at Trevor. The old chain of command was still physically present in both directions. I picked up the first trash bag and started filling it myself. Sam joined me. A rookie followed. By the time Trevor stood, half the room had already chosen which order to obey. Trevor stood. I looked at him. You can start by moving your ugly face away from my desk. The room inhaled together. Trevor walked around the broken table. You think one viral clip makes you chief? No, the order does. He pointed toward the door. Fight me. You lose. You leave Blackwater today. Sam closed his eyes for half a second. This had apparently happened before. I loosened my jacket. Fine. Trevor smiled. I added, You lose, you follow my orders without hiding behind your brother. His smile thinned. The office emptied into the training yard. Residents gathered beyond the fence when they heard the challenge. Blackwater had watched every replacement chief get driven away. The branch bully knocking out another one had become local entertainment. Trevor waved at the crowd like the result was settled. I considered that generous of him. Trevor activated ether around both fists and came straight at me. His build was heavy, fast, and designed to take punishment while forcing attention onto himself. His first punch missed my cheek by inches. I stepped outside the second, tapped his elbow with the spear shaft, and let his own momentum turn him. Trevor recovered and charged again. I hit the same knee the bodyguard and Ashfall had exposed. Trevor dropped one level, caught himself, and swung from the ground. Sixth sense showed the hook. I ducked and drove the spear butt into his ribs. He folded around it. One veteran shouted advice. Trevor ignored him and activated Taunt of Fury. Pressure crashed across the yard, trying to drag every hostile eye toward him. My charm aura stirred in response. I suppressed it and stared anyway. Congratulations, I told him. I was already looking at you. Trevor roared and rushed me. I caught his wrist, turned beneath the shoulder and put him face first into the dirt. He tried to rise. I planted the spear across his back. What? Trevor pushed once more. I increased the pressure. He went still. The gamblers stopped smiling. I looked around the yard. Anyone else want my ferry ticket? Nobody volunteered. The residents outside the fence stayed. They wanted to see whether another replacement chief would be driven away. People had watched previous chiefs get bullied onto the ferry. This time, they stayed until Trevor woke in the dirt and the new chief remained standing. Inside, the veteran who offered the drink swept the broken glass without being asked. Another hunter pulled an old patrol map from under the card table. The status change spread through chores before anyone trusted it enough to call loyalty. When Trevor woke, Sam handed me the personnel roster. I read every skill because the branch had spent years wasting whatever did not fit a clean build. Trevor's file contained one buried awakening ability. Stench in the water, I read aloud. Spreads your scent through water and attracts aquatic monsters. Sam looked at Trevor. You can summon fish with supernatural body odor? Trevor sat up too quickly and grabbed his ribs. That skill is useless. It sounds memorable, I said. It is classified as a failed skill. Sam nodded thoughtfully. Failed build, accurate. Trevor pointed at both of us. Nobody mentions this again. Closed the file. The nickname stayed. Back inside, I made every hunter stand around the broken card table. When civilians call, you move, I told them. You stop gambling, hoarding, and waiting for a better guild to arrive. Say it. One veteran frowned. You want a pledge? I want to hear whether the people collecting federal pay still remember the job. The silence lasted too long. Trevor got to his feet first. His voice was rough. We move. Sam repeated it. Then the veterans did. I tapped the pay scale posted beside the root board. Blackwater hazard pay is garbage. Give me 1 month of real results and I'll secure a 15% raise. The room changed faster than any speech could manage. A hunter who had been slouching against the wall stood straight. Another asked whether the raise applied to medical staff. Sam answered before I could, especially medical staff. Trevor checked the number again. Money had reached the part of the branch pride could not. One hunter asked, 15? Earn it. Danger deserved money. Speeches were cheaper for a reason. Curtis Vale entered while the team was cleaning. The branch manager wore an expensive coat and the relaxed smile of a man who believed every room already belonged to him. He saw the ruined card table, Trevor's bruised face, and hunters carrying confiscated equipment out of his private storage. My division seems confused, Curtis said. I kept writing patrol names on the board. Your division was losing. Curtis stopped beside me. Headquarters sent you to improve rescue metrics. I can support that. Local operations still answer to me. He reached for the written order on my desk. I put one hand over it. Blackwater is an active disaster zone, I said. Essential departments operate independently of the local branch manager during the designation. Curtis's fingers stopped on the paper. The designation had been Malcolm's real weapon. It stopped Curtis from overruling the competence already standing in front of him. Curtis looked at Sam. You knew about this? Sam met his eyes. The order arrived with Chief Reed. Curtis's smile tightened. This is temporary. So is your access to this office. I pointed toward the door. Curtis looked at Trevor. Trevor did not move. That was the moment Curtis lost the room. He walked out alone. 1 day later, I tested whether fear had become discipline. A gate had opened in a wooded ravine. The branch expected flying monsters, so the veterans formed the wide line they always used. I rearranged them into a narrow bottleneck behind 2 stone ridges. One ranged hunter stared at the formation. This violates every normal firing angle. I commit math crimes under pressure. Silent voice mapped wing beats behind the trees. Sixth sense caught the attack line before the monsters broke concealment. I pointed at empty sky above the left ridge. Fire there! Nobody saw a target. Trevor raised his shield anyway. You heard him. The ranged team fired. Hidden harpies dropped out of their camouflage directly into the volley. The first wave died before its claws reached the formation. The attack crossed 3 empty-looking lanes at once. Feathers and blood appeared where the sky had seemed clear. 6 concealed harpies fell into the bottleneck before the squad fully understood what they had hit. Trevor planted his shield at the mouth of the ravine. Dante braced beside him. The bodies blocked the wider approach exactly as the ugly formation needed. The hunters stared at the falling bodies. I pointed higher. Second wave! Same lane! They fired without hesitation. More harpies appeared inside the attack. One surviving harpy broke low beneath the arrows. Trevor caught it on the shield and Sam dragged a rookie away from the claws. I crossed behind Trevor, struck through the opening, and pinned the monster to the ground. The team had followed coordinates they could not see. Now they watched the last body stop moving exactly where I had placed them. Afterward, the veteran who had offered me the exile drink checked his hands as if someone had replaced them with useful ones. Dante inspected the line the harpies had failed to cross. Sam checked every rookie and found no claw wounds. Trevor looked at the bodies, then at the firing marks I had drawn before the attack. You knew where they would appear, he said. I knew where they wanted us looking away. Trevor nodded once. The failed build had started listening. I walked past him. Next time, they do not touch you. 1 month later, the numbers reached Curtis before my fist ever did. The performance board showed a 98% rescue success rate and an 85% increase in civilian trust. The 15% raise hit every branch account that morning. Hunters started arriving before Sam unlocked the equipment room. Valuable mana stones came back from patrol and stayed in rescue inventory. Route maps covered the card table, and nobody asked where the gambling deck had gone. The branch had become inconveniently functional. Sam checked his pay twice. The veteran checked his, then handed me a sealed barbecue voucher from the squad. I inspected it. Beef? Sam tapped the voucher. Blackwater currency now. Civilization had arrived. A resident family came through the lobby before patrol. Trevor had carried their daughter from a collapsed store 2 days earlier. The mother shook his hand. The little girl hugged his leg. Trevor forgot to look embarrassed until they left. The little girl called him the strongest rescue hunter on the island. Trevor checked whether anyone had heard, discovered the entire lobby had, and immediately became fascinated by his boot. When the family left, he carried their broken stroller to the repair shelf. Then he went back to the training yard instead of following Curtis upstairs. Federal auditors entered the lobby carrying sealed document cases. Curtis saw the performance board, the family leaving, and his brother returned to drills. His face lost color one piece at a time. He went into his office, called Victor Sloan, and shut the glass door. Curtis pointed toward the auditors, jabbed one finger at Victor's name on the screen, and slapped the desk. I heard none of Victor's reply. Curtis went still. When he came out, the card table king looked cornered. He folded the 98% report into a hard square and shoved it into his pocket. The next gate warning reached Curtis's console first. My team would hear the wolves before we ever saw the alert. The day the wolves came, I was waiting for a combat instructor at the Blackwater training yard. No gate alert had reached us. A foreign hunter arrived first. Her deployment papers named her Raina Knox. She carried one narrow blade, spoke politely, and checked every exit before looking at the people. I knew only that she had been assigned to Island Monster Control. Sam offered her a branch radio. Raina waited in her hand like she was checking whether it could explode. You expecting trouble? I asked. Raina clipped it to her belt. I expect equipment to disappoint me. I nodded. Good, you'll fit in. One corner of her mouth moved. It might have been approval. With Raina, even facial expressions carried operational security. I left her at the patrol desk because Julian Ford had arrived. Julian was a ranking master from the National Combat Arts Institute. I had asked him to teach one practical defense method before Blackwater produced another crisis on schedule. He called it flow break style. The rule was simple. An ether strike carried force along a flow. Touch that flow, open a path, and bleed the power into the ground before it entered your body. Trevor volunteered before Julian finished the sentence. Of course he did. The failed build had recovered from our spar and apparently missed public humiliation. Trevor charged with ether around one fist. Julian touched his wrist, turned one step, and sent the entire strike into the training floor. Trevor hit the dirt beside it. He jumped up and tried again from the other side. Julian folded him across the same patch of ground. Sam looked at me. Does this count as advanced training? I watched Trevor get up. It advanced Trevor downward. Trevor heard us and attacked a third time. Julian redirected him into a water barrel. The barrel lost. Then Julian called over Dante Price, Blackwater's main defensive tanker. Dante touched the incoming flow once. His timing was rough, but the force split around his arm and cracked the ground behind him. Julian's eyes sharpened. You have potential! Dante stared at the damaged earth. Nobody at this branch had used that word about him before. A howl rolled through the forest. Julian stopped teaching. Blackwater Island had no native wolves. A second howl answered from the western road. Silent voice spread across the trees. Heavy bodies moved through brush in multiple directions. Sixth Sense showed teeth before the first shape broke cover. A werewolf hit the training fence. Trevor raised his shield. Dante took the right lane. The team moved before I gave the second order. Good. Training had become instinct quickly. I drove my spear through the first werewolf and turned its body into the second. Sam pulled a wounded hunter behind Dante while Julian scattered ether from an incoming claw strike. More howls came from town. I checked the branch channel. Gate coordinates, warning, and shelter orders were all missing. The monitoring console still showed a clean island. Someone had received the alert and buried it. I opened the local console through command access. The warning existed. It had reached the manager channel 11 minutes earlier and stopped there. The manager channel had stopped the shelter broadcast, patrol coordinates, and evacuation notice. Curtis had held the door open for the attack. My hand tightened around the spear. Then, a civilian call broke across the radio. Curtis could wait. Civilians could not. 4 shelters, I ordered over the radio. Evacuation ship opens now. Sam, Shelter 2. Dante, Shelter 4. Trevor, take the harbor route. Everyone else follows the closest civilian signal. The team split. Trevor took 3 hunters toward the harbor. Sam loaded medical packs into the Shelter 2 truck. Dante climbed onto the rear platform and physically pulled 2 terrified rookies aboard. Julian stayed at the training yard long enough to redirect 1 werewolf into the ground, then sent his students toward civilian lanes. The branch moved without Curtis's permission. That was the month's real result. The first werewolf came over a parked car. I caught it in the chest and drove it through the windshield. A second attacked from the passenger side. Sixth Sense showed the claw, and I used the first body as a shield before finishing both. Residents ran toward the shelters. 1 older man tried to return for his dog. A red goblin emerged from my sphere, grabbed the animal by its harness and dragged it toward Shelter 3. The man stared at the goblin. The goblin stole his hat on the way past. Rescue quality remained mixed. I tore through the pack, blocking the main road, and reached the gate core outside town. The werewolves had come through a hidden break in the tree line. I could close it, but the shelters were already failing across 4 fronts. 1 D-rank rescue chief could not stand in 5 places. My private labyrinth could. I opened the living map. Every monster I released would drain mana and leave 1 fewer defender at home. This was the first time that cost covered an entire island. The king of the labyrinth sphere opened above the road. Black hornets poured through in disciplined lines. Hunters on the radio went silent when monster signatures appeared on their side of the map. "Do not shoot the black wings," I ordered. "They work for me." Sam answered first. "Of course they do. Why would tonight stay normal?" I sent the first swarm fit group toward Shelter 1. A second swarm split for Shelter 2. The red goblins took the underground service route toward Shelter 3. Bound ghouls moved with the Shelter 4 reserve. Basically, I had promoted my kidnapped monsters into unpaid emergency staff. Human resources would have concerns. Human lives came first. At Shelter 2, the barrier failed before Sam's relief arrived. He told me the sequence later. 2 werewolves crossed the outer line and drove the defenders toward the shelter doors. Families packed the room behind them. 1 hunter asked Sam for the retreat order. Sam looked at the civilians, remembered what the branch had been before I arrived, and refused to move. "We hold," Sam told them. The first werewolf struck. Sam caught the ether flow against his forearm and turned his hips the way Julian had shown him. Part of the force bled into the pavement. The ground cracked. Sam stayed standing. Then he drove a medical blade into the opening beneath the beast's ribs. The werewolf staggered back. Flowbreak had survived contact with a real monster. The second beast lunged for Sam's neck. Dante stepped in front of the shelter door and caught the second beast on both arms. His boots slid through the pavement. Julian's lesson had given him the path, but the force was still monstrous. Sam touched the werewolf's attacking wrist, opened the flow, and pulled enough pressure away for Dante to stay upright. The civilians behind them started chanting the branch name. The team heard people expecting them to hold. That pressure was heavier than the monster, yet it gave them a reason to carry it. My swarm fits were still seconds away. Across town, Raina had been cut off from the patrol desk. A werewolf chased her through a narrow market street. She drew her blade and moved with speed that did not match her polite paperwork. I reached the crossing first and drove Dragonfire Heartpiercer through the creature's chest. Raina stopped 3 steps away. A second werewolf came over the roof behind her. A black hornet hit it in midair. The swarmfit's jaws closed around the beast's throat and tore it off the wall before the claws reached Raina. She watched the hornet finish the kill. Then she looked at my D-rank badge. "That creature obeys you," Raina said. "It has performance issues, but yes." Her hand stayed near her blade. "What exactly are you?" "Late." I pointed toward the nearest shelter. "Get inside, more are coming." Raina looked at the hornet once more and obeyed. The ordinary rescue worker she had expected had just sent an assassin-speed monster to save her. I only knew her assessment of me had changed. I reached the hidden gate and destroyed its core. The break closed. Blue fragments scattered from the gate core. The werewolves outside lost the pressure feeding them, but none disappeared. They were already real enough to finish the attack. I looked at the 4 shelter signals and the evacuation ship moving across my map. Closing the gate had stopped reinforcements. 4 shelters still needed saving. The Hunter Awakening system rewarded the large-scale rescue immediately. It recognized that I had turned a private prison into a public rescue network. A new boundary pattern opened through every route at once, marking streets, shelter walls, and the harbor as possible entry lines. Domain skill acquired, Illusion Labyrinth. Illusion Labyrinth could pull every living target touching one of those boundaries into my private dungeon. It used the boundary instead of the sphere and pulled friend or enemy alike. Useful, dangerous, very on brand. A deeper howl shook the island. The boss wolf had entered the field. Its signal moved past the shelters. It was heading for the evacuation ship. My mana dropped as the army crossed Blackwater. Swarmfits reached Shelter 2 just as Sam's wounded werewolf charged again. 3 black shapes fell from the roofline. The boss wolf howled from the harbor. I opened the last labyrinth route. Vespa emerged above me. Every nearby swarmfit changed direction without my command. The smaller hornets formed around Vespa in a black spiral, waiting for the boss signal. Vespa looked at the 4 shelter routes, then at me. The overfed diva understood the scale. Whether she respected my authority remained the exciting question. The overfed diva had inherited speed, stealth, poison, and enough ego to ignore normal introductions. I pointed toward the shelters. Command the reserve, protect the civilians. Vespa vanished into the night. The captured army was moving. The shelters had backup. Radio calls changed across the island. Black hornets held the roof at Shelter 1. Red goblins closed a service tunnel behind the last family at Shelter 3. At Shelter 4, bound ghouls took the front line without touching a civilian. People lowered weapons one shelter at a time. My monsters had spent the whole story killing intruders inside my dungeon. Now they were taking orders outside it and protecting humans. My private monsters had finally become a real rescue army. But at the evacuation dock, Trevor stood between the wolf boss and a ship full of residents. The wolf boss reached the evacuation dock before I did. The ship was still loading families. Children crowded the upper deck. Hunters held the gangway while the last residents ran across. The boss wolf came through the harbor warehouses on all 4s. It stood taller than a truck and ignored the armed line. It went straight for the ship. Trevor stepped into its path. A month earlier, he had been the branch bully who thought rescue work belonged to weaker people. Now the people behind him knew his name because he had carried them from burning buildings and collapsed stores. The role still looked strange on him. He took it anyway. Trevor activated Taunt of Fury. The skill dragged the boss's attention off the ship and onto him. Red pressure rolled across the dock. The wolf turned so hard its claws ripped boards from the pier. "Come on," Trevor shouted. "I'm the ugly one you want." The boss hit him. Trevor tried to bleed the impact through flowbreak. The technique stripped part of the ether away, but the boss carried too much raw mass. The remaining force still crushed the center of his shield. His shield folded. Trevor crossed half the dock and crashed through a stack of cargo crates. The evacuation crew called for retreat. Trevor got up. The boss charged again. He remembered the little girl who had hugged his leg in the branch lobby. Her family was on that ship now. Trevor told me later that the memory made the choice embarrassingly simple. He raised the broken shield. The ship crew shouted that the last family had reached the gangway. Trevor could have rolled aside and let the wolf chase them. Instead, he slammed the shield against the dock and used Taunt of Fury again. The boss abandoned the ship for the man insulting it. Trevor smiled through blood. "Yeah, bad decision. Get in line." The boss pinned him beneath one foreleg and opened its jaws over his head. Trevor jammed both hands into the claws, pressing his chest. One finger bent backward, then another. He roared, twisted the damaged shield edge, and cut 2 of the wolf's front fingers away. The boss recoiled. Trevor rolled toward the water, leaving blood across the boards. That bought the ship another 10 seconds. I reached the dock as the boss turned back toward him. The evacuation ship, Trevor, and the wolf all touched the boundary I marked across the pier. I activated Illusion Labyrinth. The dock vanished. The wolf boss dropped into my private labyrinth. So did Trevor. He landed beside me, looked at the impossible stone corridor, and blinked through the pane. "This is your..." Pressed an emergency sedative to his neck. Trevor went limp before he finished the sentence. "Medical secrecy," I told him as he fell. I dragged him behind a sealed gate, treated the crushed ribs, and wrapped the hand he had used against the boss. Trevor's eyes opened once while I wrapped his hand. "Did the ship leave?" "Yes." His shoulders dropped before the sedative pulled him under again. The old Trevor would have asked whether he won. This one asked about the civilians. The new domain skill had worked without the sphere. It had also kidnapped my own subordinate because he touched the line. Very useful, very lawsuit-shaped. The wolf boss hit the first trap before I stood. While I fought inside, Shelter 2 reached its last line. Sam's radio had gone dead. He and the remaining hunters stood between the shelter doors and 3 werewolves. Flowbreak had kept him alive, but his arm no longer lifted properly. The lead beast lunged. Black wings crossed the floodlights. A swarm fit hit the werewolf from above and severed its head before the claws reached Sam. 2 more hornets struck the others. One pinned a beast to the pavement. The second tore through the throat and landed between the hunters and the bodies. Every human weapon lifted toward it. Sam raised his good hand. "Wait!" The hornet turned toward the shelter doors instead of the hunters. More swarm fits swept over the rooftops toward the next district. One resident stared through the barrier. "Are the monsters saving us?" Sam watched the hornet take position over the wounded. "I may already be dead," he said. Then he ordered the shelter team to follow the monsters' route. There it was. The creatures people feared were protecting the people stronger guilds had abandoned. Inside the labyrinth, the boss wolf refused to cooperate with my victory montage. It read the floor before every trap fired. The repulsion trap launched. The wolf jumped clear before the tile moved. Hail of steel opened from the left wall. It ducked behind a broken pillar and let the spikes pass. A closing gate dropped. The boss twisted through the narrowing gap and ripped the lower hinge away. I changed the route twice. The boss changed with me. It tested one tile with a severed piece of stone, waited for the launcher, then moved after the trap emptied. I opened a fake lane toward Mordrin's old chamber. The wolf smelled the fresh dust and refused it. For the first time, an enemy inside my labyrinth was predicting me back. Static traps had killed monsters that charged straight through pressure. This one watched, so I gave it a moving target. Me! I stepped into the center route and let it see the blood on my side. The boss lowered its head. "Good," I told it. "You understand, bait." It charged. I ran through a damaged wall and turned into the furnace corridor. Blue fire waited behind one cracked barrier. The boss tracked my body instead of the floor. I struck the wall as I passed. The barrier collapsed between us. The wolf smashed through it exactly as I wanted. Blue fire wrapped its front legs and climbed into the wounds Trevor had opened. The beast tried to retreat, but the fallen stone blocked the turn. I came back through the flames with serene mind, holding my breath steady. The boss snapped at my shoulder. Sixth sense gave me the gap. I drove Dragonfire Heartpiercer through its open mouth and into the core behind the skull. The blue fire surged down the spear. The wolf boss fell inside the trap it had understood too late. It tried to rise once. The front legs moved, the back half did not. I pulled the spear free and stood between it and Trevor's sealed gate until the marker vanished. The system offered no celebration. It only removed the largest red signal from Blackwater. Sometimes the cleanest reward was watching every shelter light stay blue. Across Blackwater, Vespa's army cleared the final stragglers. The evacuation ship left the harbor. All 4 shelters held. The island recorded 0 civilian deaths. Shelter doors opened after the all clear. Families found Sam alive, Dante still standing, and black hornets perched above the medical tents. The residents checked whether the monsters were truly finished. Then, the cheering started. Trevor's evacuation ship sounded its horn from open water. Every shelter answered through the radio. When Trevor woke in the labyrinth, the first sound he heard was that horn through my open channel. He tried to sit up, failed, and laughed anyway. "Did I look heroic?" Trevor asked. "You looked expensive," I told him. Trevor settled back against the floor. "I'll take it." Then he saw the stone walls around him and remembered why I had sedated him. "We are discussing this," Trevor said. "After your ribs stopped filing complaints, for one clean minute, the branch had done everything right. Residents who used to hide from bureau jackets carried water to the exhausted hunters. A father lifted his son so the child could see Vespa pass overhead. The boy waved. Vespa ignored him with royal consistency. Sam looked across the shelter yard at humans tending monster-made wounds beside monsters guarding humans. "Nobody at headquarters is going to believe this." "Good," I said. "They can watch the footage twice." The branch had moved past national embarrassment. During the island's worst night, people trusted us first. Their uniforms had not changed. The way residents reached for them had. Then a locked office ruined the victory. At sunrise, 2 employees ignored Curtis's order to leave his door closed. They found him sitting behind the desk with his head tilted against the chair. He was dead. Sam stopped in the doorway. Trevor reached the office seconds later, saw his brother's hands, and did not cross the threshold. Curtis had used him, lied to him, and nearly fed the island to wolves. The body still belonged to his brother. Trevor's face went empty in a way no punch had managed. I made the room stop behind him. Then I entered alone. The room was too clean for a werewolf attack. Curtis had been a B-rank hunter. Ordinary wolves could not pin him in that chair without destroying the office around him. Both thumbs had been severed with one precise cut. The office held no struggle marks, broken window, or monster scent. A skilled human assassin had entered, controlled him, and left before the rescue teams returned. I requested 1 week of entry and exit records. The screen listed supply crews, local hunters, and auditors. One outside deployment matched the murder window, Raina Knox, the foreign hunter assigned to Island Monster Control. Her entry time came before the werewolf alert. Her exit record never appeared. The branch camera caught her once near the harbor, then every angle lost her inside the same minute. A normal suspect left footprints, witnesses, or a vehicle. This one left gaps. The record narrowed the field to Raina, though one travel window proved nothing by itself. Boat service stayed halted while the murders spread through town. The locked harbor turned every stranger into a rumor. Shop owners checked faces twice. Parents walked children to shelters even without an alarm. Curtis had spent years making residents fear monsters. His death taught them to fear the person beside them too. I needed the assassin before that fear broke the trust we had just earned. Residents began stopping me outside the branch and asking when headquarters would make me manager. Apparently 0 casualties and 1 corpse qualified as a leadership campaign. I cared more about the killer still walking around them. Silent voice caught a moving absence near the eastern road. I followed it for 2 blocks. The trace vanished at a stone wall with no exit. Sixth sense pulled me toward the market an hour later. I reached the alley and found only a cold shadow and 1 footprint ending in dry dust. 2 tracking skills. 2 disappearances. My upgrade path had gone from supernatural searcher to walking. Humbling, so I stopped searching like a human. Vespa carried Queen Scepter's senses, Winglash's speed, and the lake's stolen stealth traits. If the assassin erased herself between appearances, my monster commander could search every gap around the next one. I released Vespa above the town. The hornet vanished into the coastal wind. Near sunset, the living map flashed once. The signal carried 1 image through the living map. Black water framed a cliff shadow and a human outline vanished before Vespa reached it. Vespa circled the same patch twice and held position. The assassin erased her trail between appearances. My hornet had learned to wait for the next one. So had I. Near sunset, Vespa led me to the sea below Blackwater's southern cliffs. The shoreline was empty except for 1 woman standing beside the water. Raina Knox held the same narrow blade she had carried into the branch. Her deployment jacket was gone. A black flute hung at her waist. Vespa circled above the rocks without making a sound. Raina looked straight at her anyway. "Nolan Reed's monster," she said. "So much for the stealth entrance." I stepped from behind the cliff path. Nina Hart. Raina's eyes moved before the rest of her face. The name was false. I had pulled it from an unused visitor record and watched for recognition. She corrected me automatically. "That isn't my name." "Good. Now we've established that you care." Her hands settled on the blade. "You should leave. I came to discuss Curtis Vale." Raina drew. I barely cleared the first strike. Her blade carried no wasted motion. She attacked the wrist holding my dagger, changed angle when I defended, and used the recoil to cut toward my knee. This was execution training. Every line was designed to remove a body part and leave before help arrived. The edge crossed my jacket and cut the stone behind me. She followed with a second slash aimed at my throat. I caught it on the demonic dagger. Steel rang across the shore. "Can I get 1 breath?" I asked. Raina twisted her wrist. "No!" Fair answer. I drove her blade aside and kicked for her knee. Her body dropped into the shadow beneath her feet. The shoreline went empty. Silent voice mapped waves, stone, Vespa's wings, and my own breathing. Raina's position disappeared between entries. The shadow movement erased where she traveled. Her location reappeared the instant she attacked. Sixth sense screamed behind my shoulder. I turned before the blade fully emerged and kicked her across the ribs. Raina flew from the shadow, hit the wet stone, and rolled back to her feet. Her eyes narrowed. "You read the exit. You have a very expensive cheat code with 1 loading screen." She vanished again. This time she emerged above me. I blocked the first strike, let the second scrape the dagger guard, and drove my elbow into her side. Raina twisted away before I could trap the wrist. Vespa dove. Raina cut at the hornet without looking. Vespa vanished from the blade line and reappeared behind her. The assassin stopped smiling. She had expected 1 D-rank hunter and 1 trained monster. She had found a searcher who could read emergence points and a hornet carrying stolen assassin traits. Raina stepped backward toward the water. Then her hand closed around the flute. Sixth sense hit me with a warning bigger than any knife strike. I lunged. Raina played 1 sharp note before the dagger reached her. The ocean exploded. A Kraken tentacle rose beyond the rocks and swept across the shoreline. It caught me around the chest and lifted me above the water. The pressure crushed air from my lungs. A quest opened across my vision. Kraken subjugation active. Full awakening in progress. The flute was a disaster signal. The sea answered it. "Vespa!" I forced out. "Capture her!" The hornet disappeared after Raina. The tentacle tightened. My ribs started giving. The sea below filled with another shadow. 1 tentacle had caught me. More were waking beneath it. The flute note had reached farther than Reyna intended, and Blackwater's southern alarms began screaming across my radio. The demonic dagger heated in my hand. Its sealed effect had waited since the Steelblood Orc fight for a will-driven crisis. I had one decision clear enough to wake it. I would not let the Kraken reach Blackwater. Roga. The dagger changed. Black metal flowed along my forearm and formed a longer edge shaped for the target I had chosen. Roga adapted itself to the thing I had decided to cut. I drove Roga into the tentacle. The edge bit through armor that had stopped ordinary weapons at the ferry. The tentacle's grip opened. I fell toward the water, turned in the air, and struck again before the limb could retreat. Black blood hit the sea. The Kraken pulled back beneath the surface. Roga's edge shortened in my hand as the target moved beyond reach. The flute cracked when the blade clicked it during the fall. One half dropped into the water. Reyna kept the other as she ran along the cliff path. The monster had already woken enough to circle the island. I climbed onto the rocks and followed Vespa's signal. The trail crossed 200 yards of empty shore, then vanished into a patch of shadow beneath the cliff. Vespa waited above it. Reyna emerged to strike. The hornet moved first. Vespa erased the sound of her wings, crossed the gap, and struck Reyna's shoulder with the poison stinger. Reyna cut through empty air. Her hearing went next, then balance, then sight. The Lake of Decay had transferred more than speed. Vespa had inherited enough sensory erasure to turn a professional assassin into a woman fighting the dark. Reyna dropped to one knee. Vespa landed behind her and opened her jaws over the exposed neck. "Capture!" I ordered. Vespa ignored me. I reached them and smacked the hornet across the head with the flat of Roga. Vespa snapped her jaws at me. I pointed the dagger at the ground. "Capture means alive!" The overfed diva clicked angrily and stepped away. Feeding one monster the traits of a queen, a guardian, and professional killers had produced power. It had also produced management issues. Reyna collapsed as the poison spread. I carried her away from the water before the Kraken made another pass. At the branch clinic, Sam treated the venom while I waited across the room. When Reyna woke, her wrists were restrained to the bed rail. The cracked half-flute sat on the counter beyond reach. Vespa watched from the ceiling with the offended posture of an employee who had been denied a bonus. Reyna tested the restraint once. "You should have let it kill me." I nodded toward the cracked flute. "That would make the questions difficult." Reyna pulled once against the rail. "You think I'll answer?" Folded my arms. "I think Curtis is dead, the Kraken is awake, and whoever sent you expects silence." Her face stayed still. The charm aura stirred beneath my skin. Fear in the room softened. Reyna's breathing changed. Her attention fixed on me harder than it had during the fight. That power could reduce panic and amplify attraction already present. Using it while she was poisoned and restrained would poison any agreement too. I shut the aura down. Then I unlocked her wrists. Sam removed the last venom line and stepped outside. I placed the antidote on the bed, moved the flute farther away, and backed to the opposite wall. "You can leave after you can stand," I told Reyna. "Or you can trade information for protection and a path away from the people who own your orders." Reyna stared at the open restraint. Reyna asked, "What happens if I refuse?" I nodded toward the open door. "You walk out injured while a Kraken circles the island and your employer decides whether you failed." Her eyes stayed on the exit. "And if I speak?" I answered. "I help you survive them. You answer for the people you killed. Freedom and forgiveness are separate." She watched me long enough for the silence to become a decision. Then Reyna picked up the antidote and drank it. She waited for the feeling to return to her fingers. Then she stood without reaching for the flute or the open door. That choice mattered more than anything she could promise while weak. The aura remained off. "Say the terms again," I told her. Her voice was steady this time. "I give you the contract chain, the employer, and the Kraken information. You protect me from the family that sent me. I follow your rescue orders while I repay the lives I took. That's the deal." Reyna walked to the door, opened it, and looked at the empty hallway. She could leave. I stayed by the opposite wall. After one long breath, she closed the door from the inside and returned to the chair. The bargain belonged to her now. Reyna looked toward Vespa. "Your monster listens poorly. Family trait." Her mouth almost moved. "Then I understand your household. Dry, hostile, and annoyingly close to flirting. The poison was gone, the restraints were open, and the choice was hers. Acceptable timing." Before Reyna gave me the full contract chain, she told me enough to explain the person in front of me. Blackcrest had assigned her operational names the way other families assigned school uniforms. Reyna Knox was the current one. Mika Arden was the birth designation the Patriarch used during training. Her childhood room locked from the outside. When she failed a lesson, the Blackcrest Patriarch made another child strike her until she stopped showing pain. When that child fell, Reyna was ordered to pull them upright and continue. Days before Curtis died, she had watched children playing near the harbor. One fell. Another child pulled her up, and both ran back into the game. Reyna admitted she could not remember ever playing. I did not make a joke. She had been trained into a weapon. She had still chosen where to point herself. Both facts could be true. Raina looked toward the dark clinic window. The contract against Curtis was one branch. The people above it expected my conditioning to keep me silent even if I was captured. Victor? She did not answer yet. The full chain comes when I can move, Raina said. You should prepare the island first. Outside, the sea alarm sounded again. The Kraken I had wounded was still circling Blackwater, and the flute that could steer it was broken in half. 3 corrupt badges hit Curtis's old card table. 1 badge belonged to a veteran who had sold patrol fuel. The equipment clerk who moved mana stones upstairs owned another. A hunter collecting hazard pay from home had worn the 3rd. I stood behind the same table the branch used for gambling before I arrived. Turn in your gear, I said. The veteran kept his badge. You don't have authority to fire me. Sam walked to the equipment room and locked it. The veteran looked at the sealed door, then at the squad standing behind me. Nobody moved to support him. He placed the badge beside the other 2. Headquarters had named me acting branch manager that morning because the field results already made the title obvious. The order locked in what the room had decided a month ago. Curtis's expensive chair stayed in the hallway. I kept the card table beneath the route maps. The hunters who stayed received the 15% hazard raise and a rescue bonus from the recovered branch funds. The veteran who had once offered me an exile drink checked his pay twice and showed Sam. Sam checked his own, then handed me a sealed barbecue voucher from the squad. I inspected it. Beef? Blackwater currency, Sam said. Civilization remained stable. Publicly, Curtis's murderer was still unidentified. Privately, Raina sat across from me with the broken Kraken flute on the table between us. Trevor and Sam were present because part of the chain belonged to this branch. Everyone hearing it needed to understand the cost. Raina began with Victor. After the livestream, Victor Sloan opened a Blackcrest removal request on you, she said. His wording was simple. Crush Nolan Reed before his influence spreads. Victor's humiliation had become a paid removal order. Raina continued. Curtis received Dominion money to keep Blackwater weak. He offered Trevor the rescue chief post if Trevor drove you away. Trevor stared at the table. I waited. He spoke without looking up. Curtis said the job was mine if I made you leave. Then he said, disappearing you would work too. His bandaged hand closed once. I thought it was another threat. I wanted the title enough to pretend I didn't hear the second part. Curtis had offered Trevor my chair and my disappearance. When the island burned, Trevor chose the civilians behind him instead. Raina slid 1 page from her contract packet across the table. The call before the werewolf attack was summarized in my Blackcrest briefing, she said. Curtis asked Victor to remove you. Victor refused and told him your dispatch lasted 6 months. Sam's jaw tightened. Raina tapped the next line. Curtis threatened to expose their payments and the Blackcrest arrangement. Victor warned him once. Curtis ended the call and decided your next field failure had to kill you or destroy your command. Trevor looked up. The gate warning. Yes, Raina said. Curtis received it first. He forwarded nothing. That was the whole sabotage chain in 3 blows. Victor refused him. Curtis tried blackmail. Then the card table king fed 4 shelters to werewolves because failure looked safer than exposure. Raina's contract came next. When Curtis survived long enough to threaten the network, Victor marked him as a liability. The werewolf crisis gave me cover. I entered while the branch was deployed and killed him in his chair. She did not soften the sentence. Both thumbs? I asked. Control! He kept reaching for the console! Sam looked away. Raina continued. Blackcrest raised the Kraken as a power experiment. The flute could wake it, suppress it, or steer its attention. I used it because capture meant failure. The cracked pieces on the table suddenly looked more expensive than every mana stone Curtis had stolen. What about Victor's second contact? I asked. Raina answered directly. His fallback call ran through the same Blackcrest contract channel after I missed my check-in. The relay reached me before Vespa did. Its recipient stayed hidden, though the network clearly extends beyond my branch. That answered how Victor's warning reached her. It also left 1 hidden recipient somewhere above Blackcrest. Victor had assumed Blackcrest conditioning would keep Raina silent if she survived. That confidence had outlived his plan by several hours. Raina folded her hands. I killed Curtis. Conditioning explains why I accepted the order. The murder still belongs to me. Correct. She held my eyes. Then what is the punishment? You save people. Trevor glanced at me. I pointed toward the route board. Follow rescue orders. Protect the shelters. Help kill the Kraken your family raised. Every life you preserve is one choice they did not make for you. Raina looked at the maps for a long moment. And freedom? She asked. Earned through the same work. I'll protect you from Blackcrest while you do it. She nodded once. Accepted. Started to ask what name she wanted after Raina Knox. She stopped me. Later, Raina said. I want the first one I choose to belong to me. So the new name remained unwritten. I reported the assassin as unidentified and kept Raina's cooperation inside a confidential rescue arrangement. The public report stayed truthful. Blackwater kept the captured killer pointed at the next disaster. Sam ran into the office before lunch with Victor already on television. The old peacock stood beside a Dominion banner. A reporter asked whether his guild would answer the government's request to fight the Kraken. Victor looked directly into the camera. Dominion cannot commit elite hunters without a formal request from Blackwater Command, he said. Acting manager Nolan Reed has proven highly capable. If he asks for our assistance, we will consider every option. The screen showed my rescue footage while he spoke. He praised me so he could hand me the bomb in public. Sam muted the television. He leaked the Kraken story. Now he wants you to beg on camera. If I ask, Dominion owns the rescue, I said. If I refuse and people die, Victor owns the headline. Trevor entered with one arm still bandaged from the wolf boss. What do? We kill it! Sam looked toward the shelter map. Without Dominion, especially without Dominion. Obeying Victor's leash would invite another disaster every time he wanted a favor. Blackwater residents had spent enough years being treated as expendable. I called the rescue team into the lobby. Several hunters had families in the shelters we had just saved. Fear showed on every face, nobody pretended otherwise. Coast patrols had watched the Kraken hunting sharks near the southern shore. The wound Roga left kept it angry and close. We had no working flute and no guild backup. I gave every hunter the option to leave the sea raid. One veteran asked the only useful question. If we stay, who protects the shelters? Reserve teams and my swarm fits, I answered. The raid force keeps the Kraken away from them. The veteran lifted his weapon and stepped into line. Sam picked up his medical pack. Trevor adjusted the bandage around his hand. Raina clipped the cracked flute to her belt, useless as a command tool and useful as a reminder. Nobody left. The same hunters who once gambled through patrol hours checked one another's straps and shared spare ammunition. Trevor tightened a rookie's vest with his bandaged hand. He didn't make a joke. That was how I knew he was scared, and why the rookie listened. Sam counted antidotes twice. Fear stayed in the room, but discipline finally had the louder voice. That afternoon, the branch staged beside the southern shore. A sealed package from Arkforge Guild waited on the dock. The mark matched the footage request Elliot Gray had sent after my livestream. Apparently, the country's best item maker had been paying attention. I opened the case in front of the team. The first item was a pair of sea dragon boots. I pulled them on, stepped from the dock, and stood on the water. The surface held my weight. I ran across the shallows and turned without sinking. Sam looked from the boots to the case. Those are legendary. The second item was a deep jade orb. I placed it under my tongue, dropped beneath the surface, and took one full breath underwater. When I climbed onto the dock, the team stopped staring at the sea and checked their weapons. Trevor was reading the note. Elliot Gray sent this? He asked. The note was short. Your rescue footage had terrible camera angles. The work was good. Try these before the sea monster eats you. Elliot, look, I had acquired an elite admirer without the charm aura, personal growth. Sam read the Arkforge mark again. Why is one of the country's best item makers watching you? I'm very watchable. Raina took the note from Trevor. He may need better hobbies. There was the counterflirt. Dry, hostile, and annoyingly flattering. The gear got me onto the water and under it. We still needed the monster to reach us first. Raina lifted the cracked flute. This won't carry another command. I looked at Trevor. He looked away. Sam understood first. No. Trevor pointed at him. We agreed never to mention it. We agreed nothing, Sam said. You demanded silence after we discovered your supernatural body odor. Stench in the water had sounded useless in the personnel file. Now the broken flute had turned the failed skill into our only remaining lure. The joke had waited since my first personnel review for a promotion, and the Kraken had finally approved the position. I handed Trevor a safety line. Failed build, your moment has arrived. Trevor held up his bandaged hand. I nearly died for this branch yesterday. I clipped the lime to his rescue vest. And today you get promoted to bait. Raina studied the calm sea. The Kraken may throw him back. Sam pinched the bridge of his nose. We trained Flowbreak for a month, and Trevor's final contribution is smell. Trevor glared at all of us. I can still throw people into the water. Save your strength, I told him. Something larger volunteered. Trevor tied the line around his waist while the team moved into position. Vespa hovered above the water with the swarm fit reserve. Sam and the ranged hunters held the dock. Raina took the shadowed flank. I stood beyond them in the sea dragon boots with the demonic dagger ready to become Roga again. Trevor stepped waist deep into the bay. He activated stench in the water. A visible ripple spread from his body. It traveled across the bay in widening rings, carrying the skill farther than any ordinary scent could move. The smell reached the dock a second later. Every hunter leaned away. Sam covered his mouth. The Kraken may choose death. Trevor looked toward me. This cannot be attractive to anything alive. The water beneath him darkened. Sharks broke the surface farther out and fled toward open sea. The safety line pulled tight. A shadow larger than the harbor moved under Trevor's feet. The Kraken erupted from the sea. Trevor took one step back. I opened the raid channel. Every hunter, hold position.